historic battle with Russia. During yesterday's visit to the UK, his first since the Russian invasion, Zelensky renewed calls for air support. Rishi Sunak did say that nothing is off the table when it comes to the sending of fighter jets, but that the first step will be to train the Ukrainian pilots. There is, of course, a time lag on that, and people are confused as to exactly when that will actually come into force and what we might have to do in the meantime. But Defence Secretary Ben Wallace also spoke out, confirming there will be no immediate transfer of UK fighter jets to Ukraine. Russia, obviously, have lashed out at the Ukrainian leader, calling his visit to the UK to ask for more support against Putin's regime pompous. And Putin has threatened a strong response if the UK sends jets. He mentioned bloodshed, and indeed he also mentioned global conflict. But to be fair, he has been saying that for quite a long time. Shortly, I will cross live to Donbass to speak to a Ukrainian MP over there to get the reaction from the ground. But first, our political reporter, Catherine Forster, is in Westminster with the latest. Catherine, thank you very much. A slight row back on the rhetoric, I suspect, from Ben Wallace. Rishi Sunak yesterday, well, look, nothing's off the table, although no firm promises. Zelensky himself thanking us in advance for fighter jets. Ben Wallace now appearing to say, oh, hold your horses.
Yes, absolutely. Hold your horses. Volodymyr Zelensky came here yesterday thanking us, making a very rousing speech, uniting Parliament behind him, basically saying, though, give us your jets now. Boris Johnson also saying, give us your jets. It's not up to Boris Johnson, it's up to Rishi Sunak. And today we're hearing from Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, who has been asked to look into the possibility of sending jets, that Britain has made no commitment to sending jets at this stage, and indeed we may not. What we have said is that we are going to train from the spring Ukrainian pilots to be able to use NATO standard jets. We're the first country that's going to be doing that. We're going to be doing that shortly. But whether any jets will be sent or not is deeply, deeply unclear. And indeed, the Defence Secretary, who's been at a joint press conference in Italy, has basically said that they're going to start training to improve the resilience of Ukraine, probably post-conflict, and suggesting that the pilots might not be trained until after the conflict is finished. Of course, nobody knows how long it's going to last. In the meantime, Number 10 have said that they are very aware of the escalatory risk, but that they would never do anything that would put UK safety at risk. And meanwhile, Russia have been making all sorts of ominous noises, as you say. The Russian embassy had said that Russia will know how to respond to any unfriendly actions on behalf of the British side.
Yes, indeed. And today, as well, Volodymyr Zelensky continuing his tour, he's saying, isn't he, to European leaders, look, we are actually the first line of defence between you and Putin, if Putin does desire to keep rolling straight through Ukraine and have Europe whilst he's at it. Do we know anything about what the response has been like there to him?
Well, we have led the way, and they are making positive noises too. But certainly, I don't think any of them are going to say, yes, yes, we're going to give you jets now either. Remember, going back just a few weeks to the case of the tanks, that took a lot of negotiation. We were the first country to say, yes, we're going to send them. There was then quite a delay before Germany eventually had its hand forced a bit, and America and Germany said they would too. So I'd be amazed if they go ahead and pledge these planes anytime very soon. And of course, there's all sorts of logistical difficulties. Even if we wanted to send the Typhoon fighters, they are jointly made along with Germany, Spain and Italy. We don't even have it in our gift, but there's huge complexities and problems with the sending of fighter jets to Ukraine. So Volodymyr Zelensky is very powerful in his speaking. The front pages are all about send the planes, but of course things are nowhere near as simple as that.
Yeah, they are indeed. Thank you very much, Catherine. Catherine Forster, our political reporter. I mean, I've got all the front pages here in front of me. I'm sure you've all had time to see them. If not, it's 12 minutes past 3 in the afternoon. Where have you been? Come on. But, yeah, it's all about the jets and whether or not we should be sending them to Ukraine. We did a lot on that yesterday, and we're obviously going to keep touching on it throughout the course of the show today. Vladimir Putin, for what it's worth, has basically said, because of the bloodshed, there'll be bloodshed, the next round of escalation, subsequent military and political ramifications for the European continent and the entire globe. And all of that would be on London's conscience if we send fighter jets over to Zelensky. But yes, like I said, we spoke a lot about that yesterday. It was very much a mixed bag. Very much a mixed bag, I think, on social media as well, from what I can gather, about where people stand on this issue of how far we go to arm Ukraine. So I'm conscious of the fact that we spoke a lot about that in the previous show. I'll just move it on, really, because the other big story today is about the death penalty, bizarrely. It does tend to rear its head about once a year. Lee Anderson now, the deputy chair of the Tory party, he's been speaking about the fact that he's bang in favour of it. His logic, I think, is fascinating, by the way. He does say that, well, no one's gone on to commit a crime once they've been killed. And it is actually very difficult to argue with that, although, of course, the merits of whether or not we should have killed them in the first place is a big one. I've been asking you throughout the course of this show so far, do you support the death penalty? OK. And if you do, what crimes do you think would warrant the death penalty? And it's GBViews at GBnews.uk. Quite clearly, the ones coming into me at the moment all centre around things like child abuse and murder, but we'll get stuck into the specifics of that in a minute. Just a little bit of context for you as well. I've got the latest polling data when it comes to the death penalty in the UK. I wonder what you reckon it is. So the surveys from YouGov is that 54% of people in Britain support the death penalty for terrorists. So 54% of people support the death penalty for terrorists. 40%, 40, support the death penalty just as a whole. OK, but crucially in this, 10% of people are unsure. So some swing voters out there for Lee Anderson. Now, of course, that is the big story of this afternoon anyway. And the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has distanced himself from Lee Anderson. Lee Anderson did back the return of the death penalty. I'm just going to play you a little clip now of what Rishi Sunak actually had to say.
Well, that's not my view, that's not the government's view, but we are united in the Conservative Party in wanting to be absolutely relentless in bearing down on crime and making sure people are safe and feel safe. That's why we recently tightened up sentencing laws for the most violent criminals so they spend longer in prison. It's why we're on our way to having 20,000 more police officers on our streets, and we're giving those police officers more powers to tackle crime, whether it's stop and search or just this week in Parliament, we're giving police officers the power to tackle violent and extremist protesters. That's because we want to make sure people are safe, they feel safe, and that's what we're delivering.
Yeah, indeed. Well, some more info for you. The cost of what it costs to keep somebody in prison every single year is around £48,000 a year per prisoner, roughly. Those are the latest figures. It can be a bit of a sliding scale, crucially, depending on the level of security that they've got, what prison they're at. But roughly speaking, it's about £48,000 a year. So if you imagine that someone's got a whole life tariff, someone like a Wayne Couzens, for example, will never see the light of a day again, rightly so, 48 grand a year minimum to keep that particular chap in prison. A lot of people are saying, well, why don't we just, you know, get rid of him? OK, but obviously other people are saying, well, what about the miscarriages of justice that there have been? What about the idea maybe as well that it might be an easy way out for someone who's an evil, twisted weirdo? They might actually relish the opportunity to have their misery cut short. I think it's important with this as well, though, isn't it, to hear about the families of victims. What would they particularly want? Just a little bit of a breakdown before I go into the inbox as well about the number of people who actually support, as it stands, bringing back the death penalty in light of Lee Anderson's comments. Conservative voters are supposedly much more likely to support the death penalty. 58% of Tory voters support the death penalty. Labour, 23% support it. And Britons aged over 65 are more than twice as likely than those aged between 18 and 24 to bring back the death penalty. So 54% to 22% there. Just in the inbox now, I've been asking you, if you do want to bring back the death penalty, what crimes would you bring it back for? And Linda's been on. Linda says terrorists should get the death penalty. It would save taxpayers a lot of money and observation and stress. Yes, Linda there, I think, basically saying, well, why on earth should we keep these people alive? I suppose some people might hit back there, Linda, and say, well, don't quite a few terrorists want to die anyway, so do you want to give them that satisfaction? And Steve has said, my position on the death penalty has never changed. Murder, he thinks rape, paedophilia and terrorism, they should all carry the death penalty. Well, that's basically where we are in terms of that. I'm going to be having a big debate on this, a massive debate on this. That's just after past, and I'm going to be asking this throughout the course of the show because I think it is, frankly, a massive, massive topic, and it is worthy of discussion. Interesting that Rishi Sunak has distanced himself away from Lee Anderson, though, isn't it? Keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. The reality in this country at the moment is, if we had a referendum on the death penalty, it would be very, very split. It would be about 50-50. So there we go. We're moving away from that right now, though. Like I said, we're going to return to it, and we're going to go abroad, actually, because more than 19,000 people have now sadly been killed by the devastating earthquake that hit Turkey and Syria on Monday. We'll bring you the latest on that next, as well as our debate. I'll be back in a tick.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. Bright blue skies for many of us this afternoon, having cleared the earlier cloud and drizzle in the south. But in the far north, here we've got strong winds and some heavy showers. Those showers ease in the north of Scotland through the rest of the day. The next weather front is approaching. That's actually going to bring milder, albeit cloudier weather as we head into the weekend. But for the time being, cloud clearing the south, bright blue skies for a time across England and Wales, and then clear spells overnight. That will allow temperatures to fall away in the south. Meanwhile, for northern England, North Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, a lot more cloud here. Some outbreaks of rain, mainly focused across western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, and a keen breeze keeping temperatures up in the mid-single figures. So frost-free in the north, but in the south, widely below zero and as low as -7 Celsius in some sheltered spots as we start Friday. So another cold start across southern parts of the UK. But a bright start, and we keep the sunny spells in the southeast during the afternoon, but elsewhere a lot of cloud arrives. That cloud thick enough to give a few spots of rain over Exmoor, the Welsh Mountains, northwest England, but the most persistent rain will be across western Scotland. Some cloud breaking up for northeast Scotland. That's where the warmest weather will be on Friday afternoon, 12 Celsius, and it's going to be a mild day for all of us with a lot of cloud and a breeze coming in from the southwest. That's going to be gusting over the hills of northern England and Scotland during Friday afternoon and evening. Could be tricky travelling conditions as we start off half-term in many places. But for actually overnight temperatures, as we begin the weekend, it's not going to be particularly cold. A touch of frost is possible where we get some cloud breaks overnight in the south, but for most, it's a milder start to Saturday compared with recent mornings, and it's a milder day compared with recent mornings, albeit with a lot of cloud cover and some outbreaks of rain in Scotland. Sunday looks very similar as well.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, yes, I am actually going to go live now to Ukraine. I'm going to go to Donbass, where I can speak to Ukrainian MP Alexei Goncharenko. Alexei, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Now, Zelensky was here yesterday. He was asking for fighter jets. At the moment, we've just said we're going to give you some training for people to fly those fighter jets. How do you feel about that?
Hello, Patrick. It's very nice to see you. Thank you for your invitation. I think that was a very important visit, and that was very symbolically that London was number one visit after Washington, and it shows, it reflects the importance of the United Kingdom and its support to Ukraine. The second visit of President Zelensky after February 24. Speaking about the fighter jets, it's absolutely okay to start with the training, because without training, fighter jets for us is just a piece of metal. And it should be training. It's not howitzers, it's not tanks, it's the most complicated weaponry possible. It's fighter jets. Not only pilots, but also technical crew needs training before Ukraine would really have a possibility to use them. So that's great that, again, United Kingdom shows leadership. And first, Ukrainian pilots will start to train on Western jets in the United Kingdom. Big thanks to United Kingdom people and UK government.
I think quite a few people here in the UK are scared that Vladimir Putin might be very, very angry about all of this and it might start World War III. What would you say to those people?
First of all, Vladimir Putin, if you care about what he likes or not, he will go and take London. And there is a Londongrad where Russian language is heard, and he wants to take everything. So the first thing with a bully like Putin, it's don't be scared, don't be afraid. That is the worst possible way. Secondly, he's already using everything he has against Ukraine. And the quicker we will win this war, it will be better for everybody. If we would have fighter jets, howitzers, HIMARSs, long-range missiles at the beginning, we would finish this war long, long ago for the benefit of everybody on the planet. So the only way to escalation is to prolong this war. This is a real way to escalation. That's something we should prevent. Also, I want to remind these people who are telling this, that the United Kingdom and the United States are guarantees for Ukraine of our sovereignty. We voluntarily gave up our nuclear weaponry 30 years ago, the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, under the guarantees of the United States and the United Kingdom. I think it's impossible to say that the word of this two so respected country was nothing. So I'm very thankful for all support we are receiving, but also I want to remind that this is a part of guarantees which were given to Ukraine in 1994.
And can I ask, what's the mood like where you are in Donbass at the moment? What are people feeling over there? Because there are rumours, aren't there, that as the weather gets better, as winter passes, that Vladimir Putin might make some gains. What's the feeling like?
Putin already started a new offensive some days ago. On Donbass, it's very heavy fighting. I was several kilometers from front line with our troops, and I can tell you Russia is attacking now, not somewhere in future. They're doing it now, and for this, they use the only advantage they have, manpower. Because first of all, they have a lot of people, so Russia is much bigger than Ukrainian population. And secondly, they don't care about people at all. So they are dying in thousands on Ukrainian fields, and they don't care, and they go ahead and ahead. They took people from prisons, they took convicted people, they are mobilizing, they try to use indigenous people in Russia, and that's the only advantage Russia has, and they try to use this advantage at most.
Just sorry, very, very finally, very quickly, Alexei, I want to ask you this one. Do you think that Ukraine will ever ask for British troops to go over there to fight?
We are not asking for troops, and never were asked. We don't ask for boots on the ground. We were saying it from the beginning. We can do everything ourselves, but for this we need weaponry.
Alexei, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and take care over there as well. Good to see you again. Alexei Goncharенko there, who is a Ukrainian MP. He's in Donbass. That is the scene of ongoing, current, heavy fighting. But I'm just going to give you a bit of an update on, well, frankly, an absolutely catastrophic story. Of course, it's that massive earthquake in Turkey and in Syria. More than 19,000 people have now been killed by that devastating earthquake. It hit Turkey and Syria on Monday. In Syria, the situation is being described as a crisis within a crisis, as northern Syria is controlled by rebel groups, and reports indicate that aid is flowing less easily into the region than other affected areas. For people listening on radio, we're playing some clips now of drone footage from above Turkey, and it is an absolute war zone. Everything, it appears, there in that region has been levelled. The UK government has announced more supplies for both countries to help survivors cope with the cold winter weather. With me now is Hombeline Duliere, who is Emergency Response Manager for Syria. Thank you very, very much. So the situation over there is absolutely catastrophic. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Well, as you said, it's a humanitarian disaster, which is having a devastating impact on populations that were already extremely vulnerable. The death toll keeps increasing, as you were saying, and we know also that the number of the chance to find survivors are very slim. People are still trapped in collapsed buildings. It's a race against time. It's extremely difficult. People are afraid to go home because they're afraid that the weakened houses may collapse. People are still sleeping outside in the streets or in collective shelters. The situation is extremely catastrophic, and we don't know the full scale of devastation, but we know it's dramatic.
Yes, indeed. And unfortunately, that death toll has risen within the last hour or so to 19,000. It is expected to raise even more, isn't it? What can people do? Can people get in touch with groups like yourselves? I mean, can they just donate money, clothes? I don't know. What can happen?
Yes, I mean, it's extremely important to support local organizations that are on the ground. They've been supporting from the beginning. They've been helping with rescue efforts, providing shelter, food, and so on. Our local partners on the ground, it's really important that we mobilize resources to support these organizations. And the DC has launched an appeal, so people can donate through that.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to give people the name now. It's the Catholic Agency for Overseas Development. That's the Catholic Agency for Overseas Development. And I'm sure that people will be having a look on your website or trying to get in touch off the back of this. Look, thank you very, very much. It's been great to chat to you, although, of course, under very, very bleak circumstances. Hombeline Duliere there, who is Emergency Response Manager for Syria for that particular group. Right, look, just still to come here, I'm going to be tackling quite a few hefty topics. Knife crime, massively on the rise, 79-year high, but the stats, when you really drill down into it, are catastrophic because they're getting younger and younger now, the people getting involved. Even a shocking rise in the number of 12-year-olds carrying knives and, crucially, using them. What on earth is going on there? We're also going to be talking about, apparently, some school children, even those at Christian schools, by the way, are being forced to take part in gay pride events at schools. Now, some people will say, well, there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with that? It's just progressive. It's just natural. OK. But other people would say, well, they're kids and maybe their parents, if they have certain religious convictions or just whatever convictions, I suppose, should be at least able to pull them out of those kind of things if they want to. Supposedly, that's not happening. What do you make of that? Is it a bit too much for kids? I don't know. A mixed range of views on that. But a couple on the inbox, because we're going to be having a debate when I come back off the news about the death penalty. Lee Anderson, the Tories' new deputy chair, barnstormingly, box office Lee Anderson for the Tory base. Well, people are saying that he is right in the inbox here to want to bring back the death penalty. It should be brought back, but only as an option, not for specific crimes. Also, as well, just a quick one here. Samantha's made the interesting point that not all murderers would deserve the death penalty. She made the link here between someone who's maybe been abused for years, suddenly snaps, etc. They will be done for murder, but certainly I don't think many people would want them to have the death penalty. It's a nuanced topic. We'll be debating it when we come back. Do you want the death penalty back, and for what crimes? GBViews at gbnews.uk. All of that coming your way, and much, much more. But I'm going to whiz you over now for your latest headlines with the wonderful Tamsin.
Good afternoon. It's 3:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. More than 19,000 people are now known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of UK International Search and Rescue, including firefighters and medics, have arrived in Turkey to help. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless. The World Health Organization fears many more may die without shelter, water or heat in freezing temperatures. British charities are launching an appeal today to raise funds for those affected. The government says it will match any donations made by the public. Volodymyr Zelensky has addressed an EU summit in Brussels. He's lobbying leaders to provide more weapons to Ukraine in the fight against Russia, which he's referred to as the biggest anti-European force of the modern world. Number 10 says it won't send fighter jets to the country if it puts the UK's safety at risk. The Church of England's General Synod will now give blessings to same-sex couples in civil partnerships and marriages. They'll be able to attend services at Anglican churches, including receiving God's blessing, after a legal marriage ceremony. In a joint statement, the Archbishops of Canterbury and York said it had been a long road to get to this point. The position on gay marriage, though, hasn't changed. Same-sex couples still aren't allowed to marry in church. Lancashire Police says their search for missing mother of two Nicola Bulley has moved towards the coast. The force says they're now searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also issued a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's on Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public. The 45-year-old was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog along the River Wyre. And Burt Bacharach, considered one of pop music's greatest ever composers, has died aged 94. He wrote hits like I Say a Little Prayer and Walk On By, as well as movie themes including What's New Pussycat and The Look of Love. His publicist says Bacharach died surrounded by his family at his home in Los Angeles on Wednesday. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, a legal case is being heard over the right of school pupils not to take part in Pride parades. A Christian mother in South London has taken her son's school to court after they told him that he could not opt out of taking part in the celebration, despite the family's religious beliefs. Well, our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, is outside the Royal Courts of Justice right now. Paul, what's going on?
So this is day 7 of an 8-day hearing that's been brought by a mum from South London, Izzy Montague, against her 4-year-old son's school, Heavers Farm Primary School. And essentially what happened was, if we go back to June 2018, the school invited all the parents, sent them a letter saying that they wanted to take part in a Pride event to celebrate diversity. In the words of the school, to celebrate the differences that make them and their family special. Now I'll come back to that, but Izzy Montague replying, she wrote back to the school saying that they were concerned about him being involved in a public display of adherence to views which she did not accept, namely same-sex marriage, which through her Christian belief she considered to be sinful. So she's brought, the school said you can't take your child out of that parade, and so Izzy Montague, supported by the Christian Legal Centre, brought this suit against the school, suing on the grounds of direct and indirect discrimination, victimisation and breach of statutory duty under the Education Act 1996, the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act. So we're now into the final 2 days of this hearing, at least unless it concludes today. This is day 7, and we've been hearing the closing arguments from both sides. This morning we talked about the status of that parade. A lawyer for the school setting out essentially saying that, look, this was a parade about celebrating diversity. The only time we mentioned LGBT was when we talked about celebrating the fact that all families are different, and that there are same-sex families, there are step families, there are families of all kinds, and that this was about celebrating that. And this wasn't really about talking about LGBT rights. But of course the claimant's accusation is that this was about LGBT rights. There was a rainbow flag, the kids were wearing rainbow hats, and there were songs sung that are synonymous with the gay community. And there was this really interesting exchange between the judge and the lawyer about the lyrics to Sister Sledge's We Are Family and Cyndi Lauper's True Colours. The lyrics had been modified, the school argues, so instead of saying we are family, I've got all my sisters with me, they were saying we are family, I've got my sisters and brothers with me. It was a really slightly bizarre exchange, but they were trying to get, the judge was trying to drill down to the minutiae of the status of this event that the school was trying to promote and why it was trying to promote it. This afternoon after lunch we've been hearing from the defence lawyer, for the lawyer for the prosecution, for Izzy Montague and for the Christian Legal Centre, and the judge was testing their arguments and essentially the Christian belief that it is sinful to have a relationship that is not between a man and a woman within marriage. The judge proposing that this in itself was discriminatory because it was labelled as sinful, and that could bring about, and I'm paraphrasing, but it could bring about a disagreement between two children in the playground, one considering that it was the parents of another child, same-sex parents from another child, if that could bring about bullying. But the lawyer for the prosecution was arguing that the way to regulate that would be through bullying, anti-bullying guidelines that the school should follow, and that this was about Christians' belief that another lifestyle is sinful, that should be respected. So the case continues, and we should get a hearing, a judgment, I should say, on the hearing within a couple of months.
Gosh, Paul, thank you very, very much. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter, who's outside the Royal Courts of Justice, and he did quite well to pick through the utter minefield that are the specifics of that case, didn't he? The wider point, for me, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, the wider point for me is why on earth are 4-year-olds being asked to take part in anything like that? I can understand that 4-year-olds are taught not to hate people and not to walk around being mean to people, not to bully individuals, not to be nasty, but isn't that just raising your kids? Isn't that just them being at school and teachers there trying to do their best to not turn out a bunch of rampant homophobic criminals without, on top of that, then having to say, well, do you mind putting on this rainbow face paint and a rainbow hat and we teach you all about whether or not you're non-binary, etc.? I find that slightly bizarre. Just want to emphasise again, the child involved in this case was 4 years old. I mean, is it not all a bit weird? I am also minded to point you in the direction, although possibly not to read, by the way, of a book called My Trans Teen Misadventure, which has been nominated, apparently, for the Children's Book Prize 2023 and includes things like diagrams of bodily confused individuals and even has a phrase here about my imaginary Willie. So that is going out to children, and indeed it's a potential Children's Book Award winner. So what are we really doing here, ladies and gents? But some people would say this is a great thing. I've got a statement now from Heavers Farm Primary School, which is a phrase I never thought I would say on national television, but they said, as a school, we have a duty, as stated by the Department for Education and reinforced by the Early Years Foundation Stage Framework, to promote fundamental British values as part of the spiritual, moral, social and cultural developments of our pupils. This includes teaching our pupils the important values of tolerance, inclusivity and equality so that everyone in our community feels safe, included and comfortable to be themselves. Can I just throw this out there right now? How many 4-year-olds would have felt unsafe by other 4-year-olds passing comment on LGBTQ+ issues? I very much doubt that that is realistically a thing that could happen. 4-year-olds going at each other over very, very minor LGBT issues. I don't really see how that could have produced an unsafe environment particularly. You would have to get some very well-educated and then also subsequently very bigoted and angry 4-year-olds, which seems to be a bit weird. Does anyone else think this is some kind of just virtue signalling potentially by teachers or indeed certain sects of the parents that they are now pushing on their children? A range of views on this, though. Some people would, of course, vehemently disagree with me and say, hey, it's good to try to raise kids as tolerant as they possibly can be from a young age. Other people might say it's confusing the living hell out of them. Moving on, the death penalty should be reinstated. That's according to the new Conservative Party chairman, Lee Anderson. Well, in an interview with The Spectator, which, by the way, was wide-ranging, covered a lot of topics, and I suspect will garner a huge amount of support amongst some sectors of the Conservative community. This was before he was appointed to the role. He made the argument that capital punishment has a 100% success rate in stopping reoffending. Rishi Sunak has since clarified that neither he nor the government support Anderson's stance. Labour has accused the Prime Minister of being too weak to stand up to this quote-unquote nonsense. But he has stood up to it anyway. So is Lee right? Is now the time to reinstate capital punishment? And for what crimes, I may add as well? I've been asking you this, GBViews at gbnews.uk. We'll go to those shortly. But joining me now to debate this is barrister Chris Daw KC, who's not in favour of reintroducing the death penalty. He's going up against leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton, who is in favour. Neil, I will start with you. What crimes would you bring the death penalty back for?
Well, we did have the death penalty for murder until I was a boy. I was 18 when capital punishment was abolished, so I remember executions taking place. So certainly murder would be amongst them. It's arguable whether in certain drugs cases with drug dealers and runners and the big boys, it might be a sufficient deterrent to stop the rampant rise in crimes related to drugs. I think this is something which should certainly be considered.
OK, all right, I will throw it your way now. Barrister Chris Daw KC, your views on the death penalty, not at all under any circumstances for any crime, is that right?
No, killing people is wrong. I think most civilized people, and certainly all civilized countries, agree that killing people is wrong. There's no excuse for it. The fact that it's given some sort of air of authenticity by due process of law doesn't make it right. I'm slightly surprised that you've got a crackpot like Neil Hamilton, who used to be my MP, got thrown out for being corrupt. I'm not sure why people like that are even allowed on the air, to be honest with you, anymore. I'm sure you could have got someone who's got a bit more credibility to join this debate.
OK, well, to be honest with you, Chris, I'm going to have to let Neil come back on that.
But my views shouldn't be actually on television. I think that's an interesting comment on my opponent.
OK, all right.
Yeah, I think I'd rather have people who haven't gone through the process of being utterly
Stop right now, both of you. Stop right now. We are here to talk about the death penalty debate. And frankly, as well, neither of you are going to emerge well out of this if you start lobbing muck at each other. Chris, you are not here to talk about Neil's past politics or anything like that. You're here to give an expert opinion on whether or not we should bring back the death penalty. And I will throw the same thing over to you. Let's just keep it civil, lads, all right? Chris, some people would say...
You've chosen to invite Neil Hamilton on your programme. It's your choice to include him in the debate. So you can hardly be surprised, given his history, when someone's critical of your choice.
Right. So, Chris, there is a political angle to whether or not we should bring back the death penalty, and I'm surprised I have to explain this to you, but Neil obviously is of a particular political view that we should bring back the death penalty, and those are the parameters of this debate. And I'm just going to end this entirely. So you won't even have your views put across, Chris, if you don't stop with all of this stuff. So, Chris, I will go back to you on this now and just ask you, £48,000 a year, roughly, to keep a prisoner alive forever, supposedly. Some people might say it would save us a bit of money if we've got people on a full life tariff. Why is the taxpayer having to pay to keep them in prison when we could just execute them? Your views, Chris.
Well, I'll tell you why, because I'll tell you what the death penalty has a 100% success rate at, and that's killing innocent people. Everywhere there is the death penalty, innocent people are executed. There is no possibility of appeal once you've executed someone. I've been involved in cases myself where innocent people were convicted of murder in this country, served many years in prison, and were eventually released. If Neil had his way, and those who are baying for blood and following this absolute lunatic of a deputy chair of the Conservative Party, who's got no place in a higher level echelons of our government. If people follow that perspective, I'm afraid the end result will be innocent people. They could be you, they could be my children, they could be your husband or wife, they could be anybody, could be accused and convicted of a crime wrongly, as has happened time and time again in this country and others, and innocent people will die. And if I wouldn't want their blood on my hands, and I'm very surprised that Neil Hamilton wants the blood of innocent people on his either.
OK, Neil, I'll throw that back to you. Would you feel as though you had the blood of innocent people on your hands? What about miscarriages of justice, Neil?
Well, obviously miscarriages of justice are possible, but they're far less possible today than they were when capital punishment still survived in this country back in the 1960s. We've got DNA evidence today which wouldn't be available then. And there are cases where there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever about the guilt of the convicted person. Let's take the Yorkshire Ripper, for example, Peter Sutcliffe, or Dr. Shipman, who killed 218 patients. And there are many other egregious cases of that kind. And in Sutcliffe's case, the Yorkshire Ripper, he was in prison at our expense for 40 years. He was imprisoned in 1981 and died only in 2020. And there are plenty of cases like that on the books. So, yes, I suppose it's always possible that there may well be mistakes, but I think in a well system where obviously it would only be in very extreme cases that the death penalty would be imposed. And I think the chances of an error would be quite small. And what about the people who might be deterred from killing innocent people?
Well, that's a big question, Neil. Well, see, that is, you've raised an interesting question there, because, and Chris, I'll throw this back to you, because the figures on whether or not the death penalty is actually a deterrent don't, from America anyway, and this is in relation to gun crimes, etc., to be fair, they don't really appear to indicate that the death penalty is much of a deterrent, do they, Chris?
The evidence is very clear from anywhere that has the death penalty. It's not a deterrent against anything, and I'll tell you why. I've been a criminal defence lawyer for 30 years, and I can tell you one thing. Nobody commits a crime because they think they're going to get caught. People mostly commit murders in the heat of the moment or under the influence of substances or because of a psychiatric illness. Sometimes people plan them in advance, but the one thing that they don't expect to happen to them is to be caught. So the death penalty is no deterrent because people don't think they're ever going to get caught, any more than long prison sentences are a deterrent either. People don't think they're going to get caught, and that's why they commit crimes.
Neil, if I look at the stats on this,
seems to be an argument against any form of punishment. Then, if you think,
okay, all right, Neil. Let me just ask you this, Neil. Let me ask you this now. If I just look at the latest stats from YouGov, right, it says that apparently 54% of the people they surveyed would support the death penalty for terror offences, so terrorists, who were going to go on to kill. So not your terrorist who looked at something fruity online, someone who was planning a late-stage terror attack. Also, 40% of Brits support the death penalty, supposedly. 10% of people are unsure. Neil, do you think this is the kind of thing that should go to a public vote?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I'm in favour of referenda. I think because the political classes generally are so out of kilter with the views of ordinary people on so many issues that referenda are the only ways in which we can express our views effectively.
OK, and you would be happy to call for one, would you? What about people? What about people, they say, for example, who would be like a battered wife and she snaps one day? Technically, she's guilty of murder. We couldn't have a blanket death penalty for murderers in that case, surely, Neil. Would you be saying that this is a case-by-case basis, Neil, for you?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, in the case that you pose, there would be diminished responsibility of some kind. And even under the old law, I don't think he would be likely, on a conviction, there to merit the capital sentence.
OK, and Chris, I'll throw it your way. What if the family could say, well, look, this is the only way that we think justice can be served. This guy, absolutely 100%. I'm going to wheel this out. I think it's the classic case that gets wheeled out in situations like this. It's the Wayne Couzens, Sarah Everard thing. This guy, bang to rights, full life tariff, clearly can never walk the streets again. And hypothetically, if their family said, we want this guy executed, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, I'm sorry, but we have a system of criminal justice which is public justice, not private justice. It's not about individuals choosing the punishment for an offender. That went out, I think, roughly about 2,000 years ago in Roman times, the idea of sort of blood money and families being able to choose the punishment of people who'd wronged them. These are ancient, sort of almost Old Testament ideas about justice. Justice is supposed to serve the public interest, not the private interests of victims or their families. They are not going to, I'm afraid, ever get their loved one back by the death penalty being imposed. And my experience and the evidence is that where the death penalty is imposed, the families of those who have been killed, they don't really get any form of closure or satisfaction from that. And overall, it makes society a nastier and more unpleasant place. And we need to look at ways to actually reduce crime rather than sort of banging the drum for old-fashioned sentences that went out with the Ark.
All right, both of you, thank you very much. We got there in the end, chaps. So something that I thought was going to have to knock on the head very early on. So thank you very much. That is Barrister Chris Daw KC, who's not in favour of introducing the death penalty, or Neil Hamilton, for that matter. And he was up against the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton. So there we go. Right, OK, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts. GBNews@gbnews.uk. John says, I'm going to have to try and keep a straight face now because we are obviously talking about a very serious issue. So John says, I worked for 24 years as a prison officer. During that time, I worked with some extremely dangerous people, some of whom I've actually murdered while serving a prison sentence, or have been released after serving a sentence for murder and have gone on to kill again. I'm most definitely in favour of the death penalty. One thing I think is interesting, though, it's easy to... I get what you're saying, by the way, and I think, quite frankly, most of the emails are basically echoing what you've just said there. But how would you feel on jury service? You already get called up to jury service. You might not particularly want to be there. And then all of a sudden they tell you, right, you're on trial now. And if you find this guy or woman guilty, then they're going to hang. You think, well, I didn't sign up for this. I'm just an accountant or I'm a teacher or, you know, I'm not even getting paid for this. You know, would it actually make you less inclined to want to find somebody guilty? Because that's an argument. If it makes you less inclined to find someone guilty because you don't want that risk of blood on your hands, then is that even justice? A range of views. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Loads more to come in the next hour. I am asking whether or not we should be sending those jets to Ukraine. I'm also going to give you the very latest, some interesting info on the search for a missing mother, Nicola Bulley.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. Bright blue skies for many of us this afternoon, having cleared the earlier cloud and drizzle in the south. But in the far north, here we've got strong winds and some heavy showers. Those showers ease in the north of Scotland through the rest of the day. The next weather front is approaching. That's actually going to bring milder, albeit cloudier weather as we head into the weekend. But for the time being, cloud clearing the south, bright blue skies for a time across England and Wales, and then clear spells overnight. That will allow temperatures to fall away in the south. Meanwhile, for northern England, North Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, a lot more cloud here. Some outbreaks of rain, mainly focused across western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, and a keen breeze keeping temperatures up in the mid-single figures. So frost-free in the north, but in the south, widely below zero and as low as -7 Celsius in some sheltered spots as we start Friday. So another cold start across southern parts of the UK. But a bright start, and we keep the sunny spells in the southeast during the afternoon, but elsewhere a lot of cloud arrives. That cloud thick enough to give a few spots of rain over Exmoor, the Welsh Mountains, northwest England, but the most persistent rain will be across western Scotland. Some cloud breaking up for northeast Scotland. That's where the warmest weather will be on Friday afternoon, 12 Celsius, and it's going to be a mild day for all of us with a lot of cloud and a breeze coming in from the southwest. That's going to be gusting over the hills of northern England and Scotland during Friday afternoon and evening. Could be tricky travelling conditions as we start off half term in many places. But for actually overnight temperatures, as we begin the weekend, it's not going to be particularly cold. A touch of frost is possible where we get some cloud breaks overnight in the south, but for most, it's a milder start to Saturday compared with recent mornings, and it's a milder day compared with recent mornings, albeit with a lot of cloud cover and some outbreaks of rain in Scotland. Sunday looks very similar as well.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, people, it's me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up at 4 o'clock, are we at risk of provoking Russia and facing retaliation? As it's announced the UK will be the first nation to start training Ukrainian pilots, and Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has been told to investigate which jets the UK could potentially give to Ukraine as its fighters fight invading Russian forces. Speaking to the European Parliament earlier today, Volodymyr Zelensky continued his big push for European support, didn't he? Zelensky on tour. But are we right to be considering sending jets to Ukraine? Also this hour, was the newly appointed Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson, right to call for the return of the death penalty? Big Lee said nobody has ever committed a crime after being executed, which, I mean, technically is not wrong, is it? I'm asking, do you agree with the death penalty? We had a rather fierce debate earlier on. We will be repeating that throughout the course of this hour as well. And the number of people killed through knife crime in England and Wales is at its highest for 76 years. The largest increase was for teenage boys aged 16 to 17, rising from 10 homicides to 24. And there was also an increase in children as young as 12 carrying and using knives. Get in touch, email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Look, it's all about the death penalty today, ladies and gentlemen. Why not keep it light? What do you think about the death penalty and for what crimes? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Right now, though, headlines.
Patrick, thank you and good afternoon to you. The top story this hour, more than 19,000 people are now known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of UK International Search and Rescue, including firefighters and medics, have been in the country since Monday helping. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless and the World Health Organization fears many more may die without shelter, water or heat in freezing temperatures. And British charities are launching an appeal today to raise funds for those affected. The UK government saying it'll match any donations made by the public. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been addressing an EU summit in Brussels. He's lobbying leaders there to provide more weapons to Ukraine in the fight against Russia, which he's referred to as the biggest anti-European force of the modern world. Number 10 says it won't send fighter jets to Ukraine if it puts the UK's safety at risk. The Foreign and Defence Secretaries are in Rome meeting their Italian counterparts to discuss galvanising support for Ukraine. Here, Lancashire police say their search for missing mother of two Nicola Bulley has moved now towards the sea. The force says they're searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also issued a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's on Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public who then posted footage on social media. The 45-year-old was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. PC Jordan Pascal was charged by Essex Police in connection with an allegation of non-recent rape. The charge relates to an alleged incident in 2009. He joined the force in 2012. He's since been suspended from duty and will appear in court in March. A former Labour MP has been jailed for 4 years after being found guilty of fraud committed while he was in office. Jared Amara has been convicted of 6 counts of fraud after trying to claim around £52,000 worth of taxpayers' money to fund a cocaine habit. The 41-year-old, who was an MP between 2017 and 2019, was cleared of 2 other charges by a jury at Leeds Crown Court. The judge called the crime deliberate and dishonest, saying he abused his position as an MP. Now, the Church of England's General Synod will give blessings to same-sex couples in civil partnerships and marriages. That was the applause that greeted the approved motion which allows same-sex couples to attend services at Anglican churches, including receiving God's blessing after a legal marriage ceremony. In a joint statement, Archbishops of Canterbury and York said it had been a long road to get to this point. The position on gay marriage hasn't changed, however. Same-sex couples still aren't allowed to marry in church. University staff and physiotherapists are striking today. Around 70,000 university and college union members have walked off the job across 150 universities. Meanwhile, the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy is striking at 33 trusts in England. It's accused the government of being uncompromising in refusing to discuss pay for the current financial year. The Prime Minister says he doesn't back the return of the death penalty. That's after the new Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson said he would be in favour of such a move. In an interview with The Spectator, Mr Anderson said nobody has ever committed a crime after being executed. The former Labour councillor, who converted to the Tories, was handed his new role on Tuesday amid a cabinet reshuffle. The death penalty for murder in the UK was scrapped in 1969. It was completely abolished for all crimes in 1998. Ambulances across England have improved their response times for reaching patients who called 999. New NHS England data shows crews reached emergencies such as heart attacks and strokes 1 hour quicker last month than in December. They took just over 32 minutes on average, compared with more than 90 the month before. However, the response time is still well above the target of 18 minutes. And lastly, the Prince and Princess of Wales have been visiting Cornwall today. William and Kate were greeted by members of the public in the harbour town of Falmouth. It's their first official joint trip to the county since taking on their new roles as the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall. The royal couple are there to learn about the area's naval heritage. That's all from me. I'm back in half an hour.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, I'm kind of framing this really as the wider picture when it comes to us potentially sending fighter jets to Ukraine and whether or not you're comfortable with that, given the potential ramifications. Yes, in terms of cost, but also in terms of retaliation. Vladimir Putin, look, it's not the first time he said it, has he? But he is basically threatening now World War III if we do it. How does that make you feel? Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been in Brussels today, appealing for more support from EU countries. He's on a European tour, isn't he? In a speech to the European Council, he told MEPs that his troops were defending you in a historic battle with Russia. He's actually echoing something that a lot of our viewers say, really, isn't it? Which is that it would be continental Europe that falls to Putin first. Could they not be doing a little bit more? Why are we always leading the way? But during yesterday's visit to the UK, which is his first since the Russian invasion, Zelensky renewed calls for air support. Rishi Sunak did say nothing is off the table when it comes to the sending of fighter jets. It's also worth saying as well that Zelensky did preemptively thank us for sending fighter jets, which we had not yet agreed to do, at least not openly. Rishi Sunak said the first step will be to train Ukrainian pilots, and now Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has also spoken out, confirming there will be no immediate transfer of UK fighter jets to Ukraine. Russia, well, they've lashed out, clearly. And they've basically said that Zelensky's visit to the UK to ask for more support against Putin's regime was pompous, and Putin has threatened a strong response. In fact, he talked about bloodshed and global conflict. So we all know what that means. Let's cross over now to GB News' political reporter. It's Catherine Forster, who has the latest for us. Yes, so it does appear anyway, doesn't it, that we're not, at least openly, saying that we're going to be sending fighter jets to Ukraine just yet, and maybe Putin, for want of a better phrase, can cool his jets.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, there was a rapturous response to Volodymyr Zelensky's speech in Westminster Hall yesterday, uniting pretty much everybody across Parliament that we must do more to help Ukraine. But despite the rousing language, despite him talking about Churchill, meeting the King, talking about delicious English tea, his basic message was, thank you very much, now give us the jets. Now, certainly we are training Ukrainian pilots. We're the first country to be doing that. We'll be doing that from the spring. We're sending long-range missiles. We are sending more military capability. What we are not committing to sending to at the moment, or indeed any time soon, is these fighter jets that they are asking for. Now, Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has been in Italy. He was tasked by Rishi Sunak yesterday for looking into this, but he has been clear to stress that no decision has been taken, so we may send jets in the future, although that certainly wouldn't be for at least several months at a very minimum, or we may not send them at all. And he's also been stressing that it's not really just in the United Kingdom's gift, because the Typhoon planes, for example, a joint project with Germany, Italy and Spain, we would have to get permission to send those jets to Ukraine. And also they're very intricate pieces of kit. They're very difficult, first of all, to learn how to fly, but then they've got to be maintained. They need long, smooth runways. The runways in Ukraine are not really along those lines. So there's lots of difficulties. So for all the words, for all the front pages, for all Boris Johnson saying send the planes, let's wait and see.
Indeed, Catherine, thank you very much, as ever. Catherine Forster there, GB News' political reporter. She's at Westminster for us. Now, Volodymyr Zelensky was there yesterday. One thing I'm quite keen to get your views on, ladies and gents, as well, is what Boris Johnson's had to say. Now, Boris Johnson tends to be a bit of a favourite here amongst our viewers, and for obvious reason. One area that I suspect there's maybe a little bit of a point of difference, just judging by my inbox, from what Boris Johnson's normal support is compared to his views on this topic, is send Zelensky all our jets. I'm just holding up the front of the Express there for people who are listening on radio. Where do you stand on that? Boris Johnson normally kind of hits the right notes, it would appear anyway, with a lot of our viewers and listeners. Do you think he's right about that? Because presumably if we still had Boris Johnson, we would be sending all of our jets to Ukraine, in light of the fact that is also today now the US has been wargaming with China over Taiwan. Putin saying that if we get jets over to Ukraine, it will basically start a massive bloodshed and World War III. I'm concerned about where this is all heading. I'm sure we all are. But joining me now is former British Army commander and former chairman of the Cobra Intelligence Group, Richard Kemp. Richard, thank you very much. It's going to take a long time for these Ukrainian pilots to be able to fly these jets. In the meantime, if Putin does make gains, then surely the next step is to send troops, is it not? And that is World War III.
Yeah, I don't think that's likely to happen. Obviously, we can't foresee the future, but there's certainly no appetite, as far as I can see, in any NATO country, including the UK, to deploy our own forces, whether it's aircraft or ground forces or naval forces, to take part in this war. So I don't think that's certainly on the table at the moment. And I think that would be the case even, let's say, Putin's already, I think, begun a major offensive, which is going to probably develop in coming days and weeks, which could cause significant damage, even more significant damage than has already been done to Ukraine. And I think even if he makes major gains, I still can't see NATO intervening directly in the conflict.
Yeah, I suspect there might be a limit to what we can do with Ukraine. And if, sadly, they don't prevail in that, I think at some point, if it looks like World War III is going to kick off, people are going to have to ask themselves, am I willing to die for Ukraine's territory? And I suspect the vast majority of people, normal people, ordinary people, would probably say no to that. Do you think Rishi Sunak is only promising this much now so that he doesn't look bad compared to Boris Johnson?
I think there's an element of that, but it's also right, I think, that Britain should do everything it possibly can to support Ukraine in its fight. And I think if that happens and it's effective, and it's also other countries around the world follow suit even more than they are now, that sort of action makes it, I think, a wider conflict less likely. I don't think Putin has any desire, despite his desk thumping, etc., to get into a war with NATO, which I don't think he could possibly win. So, but I do think we do need to do everything we can. I think maybe providing our own jet aeroplanes is not a practical solution, but there are plenty of countries with more practical craft, like the F-16, which is used in many NATO countries around the world, which would be more effective, I think, and a more viable solution.
Just want to ask you a little bit more about, you said that you don't think Putin has massive desires on World War III and stuff like that. Does that not imply that the line that unless we spend huge sums of money right now, and the US does, and Europe does as a whole, unless we spend huge amounts of money right now, then Putin, well, he'll run through Ukraine and then he'll come for the rest of us? But from what you've just said there, that doesn't seem to be the case, which might make people question why on earth we're spending this much.
Well, I think he certainly wants to get as much of Ukraine as he thinks he can, and that will be much more than he had in February last year. And as you rightly say, I think once he's done that, I think he will be willing and inclined to go even further. But I think that will be based on his calculation, probably rightly, that NATO is not going to oppose him. My view is that even if Putin, let's say, attacks and seizes or tries to seize part of Poland, I don't see Western European countries going to their aid. I just don't see it, not sending troops. Even though there is a NATO charter obligation for them to do so, I don't believe they would. I think he will calculate that he can get away with a lot more than he's already got away with NATO pretty much too timid. I just can't see Germany, France, even Britain sending their troops to die for an unknown piece of Eastern Europe.
Yeah, and I can see that, absolutely. You raised an interesting point there about Germany and France. And look, when it all first kicked off, I was certainly very vocal, and we had conversations, didn't we, about whether or not some of our European friends and allies could potentially be doing a little bit more. Volodymyr Zelensky is rattling the can around Europe today, isn't he, and saying, look, come on, please give us a bit more. Do you think that they should be doing more, like the Germans, for example? Because, forgive me, but I think the British taxpayer at the moment might be inclined to say, well, at the minute, we're propping up, us in America are propping up this defence of Ukraine, and we're not exactly going to get much thanks from the Germans, are we, for it?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think Germany is the best example of the most powerful country in the EU, which has really failed. Germany has shown itself, I think, again, for the third time in last century and this, to be on the wrong side of history. 2 previous wars of aggression, this time being too, I think, frightened and too tied to Russia to really pull its weight. And it's dragged its heels over sending in tanks. At best, it sent 5,000 helmets at the beginning and then ramped that up a bit. But even so, Germany is not pulling its weight, and they certainly should be. And France also should be doing so. Britain has shown, I think, the strongest lead in Europe and probably the strongest lead in the world over this. And it's time for these other countries, I think, to do more.
Look, thank you very much. I do always enjoy our chats, and take care of yourself as well. That's Richard Kemp there, who is the former British Army commander and former chairman of the Cobra intelligence group. Fascinating, that. So essentially, he doesn't really think that Putin is massively intent on starting World War III. Yeah, OK. He does also think, though, that he might have a little bit of a go on Poland and that we wouldn't necessarily step in. But crucially, I think it is time, isn't it, as he echoed there, for some of our European friends and allies to actually put their money where their mouths are. It's all very well and good having Zelensky in your European Parliament and waving the Ukrainian flag and all of that stuff, but it's just photo ops, isn't it? What about actual hardware? Why is it always on the British taxpayer to go and get Europe out of trouble? Some people might say. Now we're moving on. The search area where police are looking for missing Nicola Bulley has been widened now, and the coastline has now been scoured. It has been nearly 2 weeks since her disappearance, and a dispersal order has been issued for the village after people flocked to the area to reportedly explore an abandoned house. Let's go for an update now with GB News' North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper, who is at Knott End on Sea. Sophie, how is the search going at the minute for Nicola Bulley, the missing mum of 2?
Well, Patrick, they've now confirmed that the search for Nicola Bulley has moved from the area where they believe she was last seen to further down the River Wyre. In a statement, Lancashire Police said people may have seen less police activity today than previously in the area of the river above the Wyre, but that is not because we have stepped down our searches. It's because the focus of the search has moved further downstream into the area of the river, which becomes tidal, and then out towards the sea. Now, earlier today, Lancashire police boats were seen here at the mouth of the River Wyre, which is between Fleetwood, which you can see just over my shoulder here, and Knott End on Sea, which is where I'm stood this evening. Now, yesterday, SGI, the independent search team who've been assisting Lancashire police in the hunt for Nicola Bulley, pulled out of the search, with founder Peter Faulding saying he believes they've done all that they can do. Now, despite that, Lancashire police continue to search the River Wyre. They've moved the search further towards the coast as they desperately try to find an answer to the question, what has happened to Nicola Bulley?
Yes, indeed. No, absolutely. I mean, just this case gets more and more mysterious. And as you've said there, Sophie, of course, the search now moving on. But with it, some could argue, of course, getting even more unlikely to actually get results given the widening of the area. Look, thank you very much, Sophie. Great to have you on the show. We'll be going back to Sophie a little bit later on. That's Sophie Reaper there, who is in Knott End on Sea, and that is the latest on the search for missing Nicola Bulley. One thing I think is fascinating, we're going to be talking a little bit later on, actually, to a local journalist around the Lancashire area. We were supposed to have her on yesterday, and then we obviously got cut short because Zelensky and Sunak were doing their press conference, weren't they? But it's emerged now that the police have had to issue some kind of dispersal order because so many people are going to the scene to, off their own bat, as it were, take rather morbid selfies at this bench where Nicola supposedly fell into the river, and then also search outbuildings, etc. themselves, even posting it on social media. I mean, some people really are quite scummy, aren't they? Anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, the number of people being killed by knife crime is at a 76-year high. The biggest rise being in young boys aged 16 to 17. I wonder why that is and what can be done about it. There's also a worrying increase in the number of 12-year-olds who are carrying and using knives. Again, why is that? What's going on there? But before that, I'm going to give you a quick look at your weather.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. Bright blue skies for many of us this afternoon, having cleared the earlier cloud and drizzle in the south. But in the far north, here we've got strong winds and some heavy showers. Those showers ease in the north of Scotland through the rest of the day. The next weather front is approaching. That's actually going to bring milder, albeit cloudier weather as we head into the weekend. But for the time being, cloud clearing the south, bright blue skies for a time across England and Wales, and then clear spells overnight. That will allow temperatures to fall away in the south. Meanwhile, for northern England, North Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, a lot more cloud here. Some outbreaks of rain, mainly focused across western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, and a keen breeze keeping temperatures up in the mid-single figures. So frost-free in the north, but in the south, widely below zero and as low as -7 Celsius in some sheltered spots as we start Friday. So another cold start across southern parts of the UK. But a bright start, and we keep the sunny spells in the southeast during the afternoon, but elsewhere a lot of cloud arrives. That cloud thick enough to give a few spots of rain over Exmoor, the Welsh Mountains, northwest England, but the most persistent rain will be across western Scotland. Some cloud breaking up for northeast Scotland. That's where the warmest weather will be on Friday afternoon, 12 Celsius, and it's going to be a mild day for all of us with a lot of cloud and a breeze coming in from the southwest. That's going to be gusting over the hills of northern England and Scotland during Friday afternoon and evening. Could be tricky travelling conditions as we start off half-term in many places. But for actually overnight temperatures, as we begin the weekend, it's not going to be particularly cold. A touch of frost is possible where we get some cloud breaks overnight in the south, but for most, it's a milder start to Saturday compared with recent mornings, and it's a milder day compared with recent mornings, albeit with a lot of cloud cover and some outbreaks of rain in Scotland. Sunday looks very similar as well.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
All too often, people like me sit here and say the phrase shocking figures, and actually they're not that shocking, but these really are, because shocking figures today show that the number of people killed with a knife in England and Wales is at its highest level in 76 years. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show that 4 in 10 murders were committed using a knife or sharp object in the year 2021 to March 2022. That's up by almost 20%. But more worryingly, as if it could get even worse, it can, more worryingly, the largest increase was in teenage boys aged between 16 and 17, rising from 10 deaths to 24. Joining me now is Nick Buckley, MBE, who's charity founder and author. Look, Nick, thank you very, very much. This is staggering. Why are so many young boys stabbing each other to death?
The answer that nobody really wants to hear is
Because nobody cares. That really is the answer. This has been going on for decades, getting worse and worse every decade. We talk about it all the time. We throw our hands up in the air and we go, oh, what a shame. But deep down inside, nobody cares. And the reason why I know nobody cares is because no one's doing anything about it. Black Lives Matter are not doing anything about it because this affects black boys more than anybody else. Politicians aren't doing anything about it. And if we dig down even deeper, the sad fact is, anti-racism is killing young black boys because nobody wants to be called a racist in this issue.
So just explain that a bit more to me and to our viewers and our listeners. Is it, in your view, what? The fact that, unfortunately, some of the demographics involved in knife crime make for uncomfortable viewing and reading for anti-racist charities, etc., so they don't want to highlight it? Or what's the thinking there?
So we all know knife crime affects the black community more than any other community. It's a fact. The stats show that. But also, from the work I've been doing over the last 15 years, carrying a knife is becoming more and more fashionable. And the reason why it's becoming more and more fashionable is because young people now don't know anybody who's been stopped and searched by the police. So they feel, unless I pull this out, no one's going to know I've got it on me. And when they do pull it out in front of a bad guy to scare him, that doesn't scare a bad guy. So the bad guy then takes the knife off you and stabs you with your own knife because now you've disrespected him. But if we're looking at the so-called race angle, the police are terrified of stopping young black men in case they're called racist, in case passers-by film them and are screaming at the police, you racist, you racially profiled that young person. But what the police are trying to do is save that young person's life. And I've almost come to a stage now where rather than disrespect young people on the street and search them for knives, let's wait till at the morgue and we can search them in private. That's a lot better for everybody. That's how we're running our anti-knife crime initiatives now. Let's search them at the morgue.
When it comes to stopping knife crime, a lot of people will go, well, stop and search, surely, is the answer to this. But that has a lot of connotations, doesn't it? So how do we stop young, mostly boys, let's be honest, carrying knives?
Several things. The first thing is stop and search, but it is politically tricky to increase that. So what I would do, and I've been saying this for 10 years now, we need to go back to those communities and we say to them, we're going to give you in your council ward an annual vote at the local elections. There'll be a separate ballot paper. You can vote if you want more stop and search in your area, which means your child is more likely to be stopped and searched in the area they live. And as a resident and as a parent, this is your choice. If you vote no, that's fine. If you vote yes, we start stopping and searching more young people in your area in the hope we can save lives. That then gives the police the authority from the residents in those areas to do more or do less. And if the police do more and then accused of being racist, their answer is the people who live in this area have asked for more stop and search. Now, on the flip side of that, it's not education. We don't need to go in schools and start educating people. Do you know how bad it is carrying a knife? We all know, they know. The education must be, these people got caught carrying a knife in your area and we're prosecuting them. These are their names, these are their photos, because young people think no one's ever been caught carrying a knife.
Yeah. Can I ask you, in light of one of the big discussions that we've been having throughout the course of this show today, which is the death penalty debate opened up for us by Lee Anderson, the new deputy chair of the Tory party. Do you think that if people knew that they would get the death penalty for a knife-related murder, that it would bring the stabbings and the fatal stabbings down?
That's a huge discussion. So for the papers I've read, bringing in a death penalty doesn't necessarily reduce murders. Because people who commit murder don't think they're going to get caught anyway.
Yeah.
The people who are psychopaths don't think that far enough ahead to realise the consequences to their actions. So it doesn't really affect that. I'm in favour of the death penalty for many, many different crimes. Death penalty works in two ways. A, it gives people confidence in the neighbourhoods they live that there is a severe punishment for certain things and it will deter a small percentage of people. It's then also a warning to wider criminal society that there's lines you cannot cross.
Yeah.
And that will reduce other crimes as well.
Okay. All right, Nick, thank you very much. Always appreciate our conversations. That's Nick Bulley, MBE, their charity founder and author. And yes, anyway, look, keep your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Just a couple of quick stats for you on this as well that might really drill down. The homicide rate, apparently, in England and Wales is 11.7 people per million population. So there you go, 11.7 per million of the population, which is increasing. I have just been told I've got some breaking news for you, ladies and gentlemen, so let's find out together, shall we? Some breaking news. Members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay increase from April the 1st. April the 1st, anyone know? Bringing the overall salary from £84,144 to £86,584. Right, OK, so MPs will get a 2.9% pay rise. That's coming in from April the 1st. I think we should probably, at this point, what everyone else is going to be doing, isn't it, which is compare that to some of the pay rises being offered to people in the public sector. What would you make of that? Supposedly, anyway, things like train drivers, or trained staff, I should say, for people like the RMT, pay rise, I believe anyway, of 5% this year and a 4% pay rise backdated. Also nurses as well, they were offered somewhere in the region of that. So MPs, OK, yes, starting much higher, but they are 2.9% is the pay offer that they will be given. Inflation, of course, I mean, it's hard for me to keep up with exactly where inflation is at the minute, but it's something like 10 or 11%, isn't it? What do you make of all of that? We'll be dipping our toe into that particular cesspit a bit later on. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Do you think it's right that MPs get a 2.9% pay rise? And that is coming your way from April the 1st. Let's be honest with you, we're all paying for it, aren't we? Does that mean that the minimum pay offer for people in our public sector should be 2.9% or what? You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. The search for missing mother Nicola Bulley has moved to the coastline this afternoon as police take to boats in Morecambe Bay 2 weeks after her disappearance. We're going to go live there very, very shortly. And do you agree with the newly appointed Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson, when he says that we should consider reintroducing the death penalty? Interesting, because if you read the polls on that, it's pretty split, by the way. I will speak to a man who's worked to overturn death sentences for convicts in the US. But right now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories on GB News, and we have some breaking news in the last few minutes. Members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay increase from the 1st of April. That would bring their overall salary from around £84,000 to £86,000. We'll bring you more on that if it happens. Now, main news, more than 19,000 people are known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of the UK International Search and Rescue Team joined the effort to try to find people in the rubble. They tweeted just now they've recently managed to rescue 2 women aged 60 and 90. British charities are from today appealing for funds to help those affected by the disaster, with the UK government saying it'll match up to £5 million in public donations. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has addressed an EU summit in Brussels. He's lobbying leaders to provide more weapons to Ukraine in the fight against Russia, which he's referred to as the biggest anti-European force of the modern world. Number 10 says it won't send fighter jets to the country if it puts the UK at risk. That was the applause that greeted the Church of England's General Synod, now giving blessings to same-sex couples in civil marriages and partnerships. They'll be able to attend services at Anglican churches, including receiving a blessing after a legal marriage ceremony. In a joint statement, the Archbishops of Canterbury and York said it had been a long road to get to this point. The position on gay marriage, though, hasn't changed. Same-sex couples aren't allowed to marry in church. And as you've been hearing, Lancashire Police say their search for missing mother of 2 Nicola Bulley has moved towards the coast. The force says they're now searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also issued a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's on Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public. The 45-year-old was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog along the river. And lastly, Burt Bacharach, considered one of pop music's greatest ever composers, has died at the age of 94. He wrote hits like I Say a Little Prayer and Walk On By, as well as movie themes, including What's New Pussycat and The Look of Love. His publicist saying Bacharach died surrounded by his family at his home in Los Angeles on Wednesday. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We're back in just a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
This Saturday at 8 p.m, tune in to a GB News Investigates documentary as we tell the full story of the grooming gang scandal.
My childhood had been stolen.
We will expose the cover-ups that have kept this national scandal under wraps for decades.
Not one person has been held accountable.
Our investigation uncovers the true scale of this outrage.
I want to see senior officials held legally to account.
On GB News, grooming gangs, Britain's shame.
Yes, well, I'll tell you what, there's a crime. You just saw in that promotional video there for Charlie Peters' new GB News Investigates is coming out on Saturday. There's a crime that I dare say a lot of people would want the death penalty for, the old grooming gang debate. But we have been talking a lot about the death penalty today, with good reason. Lee Anderson, the new Tory deputy chair, has come out and said that essentially, well, what he's really said is that you can't commit a crime after you've been killed, can you? And it is difficult to argue with that logic. However, there's a lot to it, of course. What crimes would you bring the death penalty back for? Is it a barbaric practice? Would it put a lot of pressure on jurors? If you were doing your jury service and you knew that not only would you find this man or woman guilty and they could be sentenced to life in prison without parole, say, that they could also get executed as well, would you feel comfortable with that? Maybe you're just a normal person. You don't really sign up to that when the letter for your jury service drops on the mat, do you? But Lee Anderson seems to think that maybe it's a good idea. Look, I don't know. For me, personally, for certain crimes, I'd be banging in favour of it. But let me know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Should the UK bring back capital punishment? And that is because Lee Anderson has piped up on the matter. The member for Ashfield praised the policy on the grounds that, like I said, nobody has ever committed a crime after being executed. He seems to have the support of large swathes of the public. Now, a recent YouGov poll suggested that 52% of people think the death penalty should be reinstated in cases of multiple murder. I've also got stats here. 54% of people think that it should be reinstated for cases of terrorism where that terrorist was going to go on to kill people, so not just someone who looks up something fruity online or whatever. But overall, it's around the 40% mark for people who think we should reinstate the death penalty. But crucially on that, 10% of people are undecided. So, realistically, if we had a referendum on it, it could go either way, couldn't it? Well, the Prime Minister has now distanced himself and the government from the remarks, clarifying that neither he nor his administration support the death penalty. Joining me now to discuss this is Clive Stafford-Smith, OBE. He's a British lawyer who's working against the death penalty in the United States. Thank you very much, Clive. Why are you so against the death penalty?
Well, look, what Mr. Anderson says is that people who've been executed can't commit another crime. Well, I've represented a number of people who've been executed who didn't commit a crime in the first place. And that's obviously the big issue in the end. You know, I've done a lot of death penalty cases and I consider myself relatively good at it. But I've managed to screw up a case where a young man was executed in 1987 who was totally innocent. And just last week was the 70th anniversary of the hanging of Derek Bentley, who was a mentally disabled young man who was sentenced to death. There's been a film about it, Let Him Have It, Let Him Dangle by Elvis Costello. And he's now been pardoned, but it's a bit late for him because he was hanged. So that's the bottom line.
But what about people, Clive, what about people who absolutely unequivocally killed someone in a horrific way? They can never walk the streets again, and we are, just as taxpayers, going to spend a minimum of around £48,000 a year to keep them at Her Majesty's pleasure. Wouldn't it be better if we just slotted them?
Well, your problem there is that people say that like it's so easy to figure out. But every single time an innocent person has been sentenced to death, the government said they did it, 12 jurors swore beyond a reasonable doubt they did it, all these judges said they did it, and then it turned out they didn't. And so, you know, human beings are strange people, and we mess up all the time.
I get that. To be fair, Clive, I do understand what you're saying, but to be fair, Clive, there are certain cases where the person definitely did it. And even in those situations right now, do you still think, because is that more of a moral thing then for you? Is it that it's maybe an archaic, barbaric practice?
It is an archaic, barbaric practice, and I've watched 6 people die in front of me, and it's always in the middle of the night. And you look up at the stars as you come out of the execution chamber and say, wow, did that just make the world a better place? But the flip side of what you're arguing, and I hear what you say, but we have experience in the US. I apologize. I am half American, so I have a lot to apologize for. And it is way more expensive to do a complicated capital trial as opposed to a life case than it is to keep someone in prison for the rest of their lives. And that's when we do it in America, and we mess up. According to a thing I'm working on, I've got 184 people I'm representing right now who are dead, who I'm exonerating. And, you know, these are 184 executed people we can't bring back.
You've alluded to some really very, very central points to this, which is the question of miscarriages of justice. There's the question of cost. I know that people wheel out, and I gave some stats earlier on, it costs around 48 grand a year to keep someone in prison. Yeah, that doesn't account for the amount of trials and retrials and then the cost of the execution as well, and I completely understand that. There's also the question of deterrence, isn't there, which is it even a deterrent? And my understanding of the stats from America, and actually, frankly, kind of all over the world, really, would suggest that it isn't much of a deterrent. There's a moral question, though, apart from all of those things, which is that is an eye for an eye a good thing for the victim's family? If the victim's family wanted someone to be killed because they did some unspeakable things to their child or their daughter, do we not, as a society, owe that to the victim's family?
Well, 2 things on that. First, what we say in America is, you know, why do we kill people who kill people to show that killing people is wrong, which for me sort of sums up that whole issue. But also, I meet with the victim's family in every single case that I've ever dealt with. And I've been in the execution chamber with the victim's family when they were told by the prosecutors that it was going to make them feel better to watch this guy die. And it just never did. And I'm just not sure that that's really what our society is about. I'd like to think that we can try to show a bit more compassion, even in the most dreadful things that go on in life.
Would you, just very finally, sorry, and quite quickly on this, what about punishment? So not the death penalty. Some people say, well, actually, a lot of people would quite welcome the death penalty. I mean, you have to look at some high-profile cases. Harold Shipman killed himself, didn't he? Quite a lot of these people do. They kill themselves, don't they? It's like they want a way out. So maybe the death penalty, even from that angle, could well be a relief to someone who doesn't want to spend the rest of their life behind bars. What about physical punishment? Would you still be against that if someone was given 100 lashes every month or something like that? Someone like a Wayne Couzens, for example?
I've got to say I would be. I mean, a prison is a dreadful place. It's sort of funny that people think that life in prison is somehow a doddle. If you imagine spending the rest of your life cooped up in a cell, it's just not a great thing. And the idea that on top of that we should go around beating people with a whip, no. I think we've progressed beyond that, I hope.
Clive, thank you very much. Fascinating insight into all of this, and I would like to talk to you again at some point, actually, about your experiences, because it does sound like you've got a lot of, well, very interesting first-hand experience, actually. Clive Stafford-Smith, OBE, thank you very much, and he's a British lawyer. He's working against the death penalty in the United States. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? There are very much two sides to this, and that's evidenced in the polls, because the polls are quite split when it comes to whether or not we should bring back the death penalty. Again, just want to emphasise I've not decided to randomly crowbar this discussion here today. Lee Anderson, the new Deputy Tory Party chair, has basically done it for us anyway. Right, the area where police are looking for missing Nicola Bulley has been widened. This is the missing persons case that's gripped the nation. The coastline of Morecambe Bay is now being explored. The new search zone comes after the specialist diving team brought in by the family of the missing mother of two pulled out of the search. They categorically believe Nicola is not in the river where police think she is. Joining me now is Nicola Adam, who's the editor of the Lancashire Post. Now, Nicola, apologies, because yesterday we got cut short. You got biffed by Vladimir Zelensky, unfortunately. But in this case right now, then, we are hearing that the search has been widened. What does that really mean?
And what that means is they've been concentrating very much, has been widely reported, around the area of the bench and immediately where the phone was found, that little area up to the weir. Now, what they appear to have done today is completely widened the area. They've gone to where the wire spills into the sea, which is like the Knot End filed area, and they've actually taken the boats to the mouth of the river there. Then they've worked their way upstream, so they've gone and had a look upstream, but then they've come back down and they're looking around in the actual sea where where the water comes out there. So they're obviously having a proper scour around there. So they're obviously still convinced that that's where Nicola is, in the river, or at that point by now.
Aren't they? Yes. And something that, as well, it would appear police are having to battle against in this incident is ordinary members of the public who have decided to take it upon themselves to either take quite odd selfies at the bench where Nicola is supposedly said to have gone missing, or also searching themselves. Is this right? Dispersal orders have been issued, which I find quite bizarre.
Yes, I think on the back of a lot of conspiracy theories which are circulating online, and bearing in mind the police have already searched these buildings, all the empty ones anyway, but they've last night there was an issue where there was two groups really. There was two main groups. One group came from Liverpool and were just making a pain of themselves, filming TikToks outside the front of people's houses in this little tiny village of St Michael's. And then the other group were actually, essentially, they'd broken into the grounds of one of these properties and were filming in the dark, doing TikToks and live sort of videos from there as if it was a ghost hunt or something. So what's happened is Lancashire Police have had to take action. So they've put 2 dispersal orders in place for those 2 groups. But these dispersal orders are wider than that. They last for 48 hours. So it's a warning to anyone else, because there is an awful lot of people in a very small, little, quiet village at the moment. There's all the press, ourselves, there's the police, there's searchers, and now there's sort of just random, almost like sort of tourists of the situation, which is...
I'll say it, weirdos, really. Some of them aren't they, let's be honest. But Nicola, just in terms of what the area might be feeling like now, obviously everybody's still hoping Nicola turns up safe and well. The police are saying that they believe she's in the river. As yet, we have to find her. You don't want to speculate too much, but look, people presumably concerned in the area that what it might mean if something has happened to her that doesn't involve going in the river? Is someone still at large or something like that? Are people quite worried in the area?
I think people are worried, but I think the police seem to be so convinced that this is what's happened that largely in the local area, everybody just wants some sort of end to this for the family, because it's this knowing nothing is just so agonising for the family, for local residents. For, you know, it's a small place, everybody knows each other, so a lot of people know Nicola and her family and her friends. They just want some culmination to it all, but obviously we're all desperately hoping that there's a happy ending still to be had, that something that nobody's thought of has happened, you know, and that there's going to be like a little mini miracle here. But at the same time, you know, there's also sort of a realism, and it's really, really quite sad. Feels very sad in St Michael's at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Look, thank you very, very much. It's been great to have you on the show and to actually get to talk to you today as well. That is Nicola Adam there, who is the editor of the Lancashire Post, which is, of course, covering the area where Nicola Bulley sadly went missing 2 weeks ago. Now 2 weeks, good grief. And it is that case that's gripped the nation, and it's gripped it because it just seems so strange, doesn't it, really? Just out walking her dog. Police initially still dead convinced that she's in that river. And then, of course, as well, they've had dive teams, they've had specialist sonars. They're saying she doesn't seem to be found there, and they're widening the search area. Very, very mysterious. But look, we're moving on now from that. And the Church of England's synod, often thought as the Church's parliament, has voted in favour of allowing blessings for same-sex couples, but they remain unable to marry in the Church. And attention is turning to God's gender. Priests are considering stopping using gendered language such as he and him, and a new project looking into the use of more inclusive language will begin in the spring, with any changes marking a departure from the traditional Jewish and Christian teachings dating back millennia. We tried to talk about this again yesterday, but we're back for more because, yes, we were pushed a little bit by Zelensky and Kurt, weren't we? Joining me now to discuss whether God should be gender neutral is the head of Public Policy at Christian Concern, Tim Dieppe, and Martine Oborne, who's a vicar at St Michael's Chiswick. This very much is third time lucky, OK? Tim, do you think God's a man or a woman?
So, listen, Jesus was born a man, wasn't he? He was a man, not a woman, and he wasn't trans or gender non-binary or something like that. He was born a man, he lived as a man, he died as a man, he even rose from the dead as a man and entered heaven as a man, and he prayed to God as his Father. And he said that we should pray to God as our Father. And the Trinity is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And if you start messing with that and start saying, well, actually, I think we're worship instead of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, worship something like Mother, Sister, and Holy Spirit. That's basically a different God. You're basically saying, oh, we're making up God, who we want him to be. You've changed your religion then. I think it's a very significant change. I think it's really crazy. I think it's just a capitulation to kind of woke non-Christian ideology.
Well, on that,
that's in the Bible and it's in all the creeds.
OK, that's the kind of question I was going to ask, really, Martine. I mean, is this just a capitulation to woke nonsense?
It's nothing to do with wokery at all, and it's nothing to do with anything newfangled. I mean, Jesus was a man, but we're talking about God here, and there's never been any suggestion in the Bible or in Christian teaching that God is a male human being. And so I think that anything that helps us to understand the nature of God better, who transcends gender, is really helpful. And I think it's very important that we get away from giving the impression that somehow Christians believe in this rather clumsy and lazy picture of God being an old man, an old white man sitting on a cloud. That is not what we believe.
Why is that so important?
On the very first page of the Bible, it says that God created humankind in his image, male and female, he created them. It's very scriptural to think of God as mother as well as father.
OK, well on that point then, Tim, that is quite interesting, actually, because I spoke to a Catholic lay priest yesterday who was quite adamant to me that God had self-identified, right? In the same way that Sam Smith has done, and we now all have to respect Sam Smith's pronouns. God had self-identified as a man, and we must respect God's pronouns. But Martine seems to be alluding to the fact that God has said that they could be a man or a woman. Your views, Tim? It's a minefield, this.
Well, I think that every time God is referenced in the Bible, it's using male pronouns and male language and that kind of thing. Clearly, there are feminine characteristics occasionally. Clearly, you're right to say that God, as God, isn't gendered in the same way that humans are. nevertheless, Jesus obviously was, and Jesus is God as well. So that's clear. And I think the language matters here. I think the language of father is better than like parent. Parent is somewhat impersonal, somewhat sort of, distanced. And the fatherhood is kind of like an important concept and something that we need to recover and something we need to carry on using. And I think a move away from that sort of gender-neutral kind of language like that is wrong and will sort of diminish something about Christianity. It's a deliberate attempt to move away from the biblical language and the creedal language that we all have used for centuries.
Martine, is there a massive call to actually do this? I can understand when things change with the times, when you've got people burning pitchforks in the street and saying we need to do this now, and society goes, yes, all right, we must move on. But actually, no one's really calling for this, are they?
I think that there's a bit of confusion here. I don't think anyone is saying that we need to ditch or should ditch father language. I mean, the father metaphor, I think, we very much want to keep. And I don't see that anyone saying we want to change the Lord's Prayer or anything like that. But I think that it is helpful to, first of all, as I say, to give a better understanding to people of who God is. But also, I think it is very challenging for women and girls when they are exploring their faith and they come and God is presented to them as male, 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 as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That is that's very challenging, and in respect of God, the Creator, it's misleading. So I think it's I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. I don't think it's anything new. All these references come from the Bible in terms of God as mother.
I get that, and kind of echoing the statement that I was about to read out actually from the church anyway, which just saved me a job. So thank you very much, both of you. Look, we could talk about this for a long while longer, but I'm not allowed because we're at the end of the hour. So I'll have to have you back on both very, very shortly. Thank you very much. That is the Head of Public Policy at Christian Concern, Tim Dieppe, and Martine Oborne there, who is the Vicar at St Michael's Chiswick and also the chair of the National Campaign Group for Gender Equality in the Church of England, Women and the Church, which is a very long business card, one would imagine. I've got loads more coming your way. Make sure you don't turn over. We've got more on that death penalty debate and more woke nonsense. Stay tuned.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, what a final hour I've got lined up for you, ladies and gents. It's just gone 5 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Now, more on that breaking news within the last half hour. MPs are set to get a 2.9% pay rise. That's starting from April the 1st, actually, so... You know, what a joke, but there we go. Bringing their overall salary from 84,144 quid to just over 86.5 grand. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority says it's the same as the average rise for public sector workers last year. We all know the massive debate that is about to ensue on all of this, so who better to get on than a union leader? So I'll be talking to them very shortly. Also this hour, Vladimir Putin has warned about bloodshed and military consequences, basically World War III. After Rishi Sunak's love-in with Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday and talk of fighter jets being provided to Ukraine. Zelensky is currently rattling the can on a European tour, trying to get more support. I'll be going live to Ukraine's Donbass region as well. We're going to see how people are getting on over there. And should we bring back the death penalty? New Tory Deputy Chair Lee Anderson, he's in favour of it. Rishi Sunak, well, he's distanced himself, hasn't he? Lee Anderson's logic is this. Nobody has ever committed a crime after being executed. And technically, he's not wrong there, is he? I'm asking, what crimes do you think deserve the death penalty? Get in touch. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Would you bring back the death penalty? What crimes deserve the death penalty? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But right now, here's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon to you. Our top story. More than 19,000 people are now known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of the UK International Search and Rescue Team have joined the effort to try to find people in the rubble. They tweeted to say they'd recently managed to rescue 2 women aged 60 and 90. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless in freezing conditions, with the World Health Organization warning many more could die without shelter. British charities are appealing for funds to help those affected by the disaster, with the UK government saying it'll match up to £5 million in public donations. Now, as you've just been hearing, members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay increase from the 1st of April. That would bring their overall salary from around £84,000 to £86,000 a year. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority says the pay increase for MPs was the same as the average increase in pay for public sector employees last year. Lancashire police say their search for missing mother of 2 Nicola Bulley has moved now towards the sea. The force says it's searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also had to issue a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's on Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public, trying to solve the case for themselves and then posting footage on social media. The 45-year-old was last seen walking 13 days ago with her dog by the river. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. PC Jordan Pascal was charged by Essex Police in connection with an allegation of non-recent rape. The charge relates to an incident in 2009. He joined the force in 2012. He's since been suspended from duty and will appear in court in March. A former Labour MP has been jailed for 4 years after being found guilty of fraud committed whilst he was in office. Jared O'Mara has been convicted of 6 counts of fraud after trying to claim around £52,000 worth of taxpayers' money to fund a cocaine habit. The 41-year-old, who was an MP between 2017 and 2019, was cleared of 2 other charges by a jury at Leeds Crown Court, the judge calling the crime deliberate and dishonest, saying the former MP abused his position. The Church of England's General Synod will now give blessings to same-sex couples in civil partnerships and marriages. That was the applause that greeted the decision to approve the motion allowing same-sex couples to attend services at Anglican churches, including receiving their God's blessing after a legal marriage ceremony. In a joint statement, the Archbishops of Canterbury and York said it had been a long road to get to this point. The position on gay marriage, however, hasn't changed. Same-sex couples aren't allowed to marry in church. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has addressed an EU summit in Brussels. He's been lobbying leaders to provide more weapons to Ukraine in the fight against Russia, which he's referred to as the biggest anti-European force of the modern world. Number 10 says it won't send fighter jets to Ukraine if that puts the UK at risk. The Foreign and Defence Secretaries are currently in Rome meeting their Italian counterparts to discuss ways of galvanising support for Ukraine. The government's introduced new legislation that forces social housing landlords to fix damp and mould. Awab's law comes into force following the death of 2-year-old Arab Ishak, which was directly caused by damp and mould in his home managed by Rochdale Borough-wide Housing. The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, says landlords who drag their feet will face the full force of the law. Now, ambulance crews across England have improved their response times for reaching people who call 999. NHS England data shows paramedics reached emergencies such as heart attacks and strokes an hour quicker last month than in December 2022. They took just over 32 minutes on average, compared with more than 90 the month before. However, the response time is still well above the target of 18 minutes. And lastly, Burt Bacharach, one of pop music's greatest ever composers, has died at the age of 94. He wrote hits like I Say a Little Prayer and Walk On By, as well as movie themes including What's New Pussycat and The Look of Love. His publicist says Bacharach died surrounded by his family at home in Los Angeles on Wednesday. You're with GB News. More news in half an hour. See you then.
All right, we'll get stuck in with a little bit of breaking news, shall we? Which is that members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay increase from April the 1st. Yeah, jokes write themselves sometimes, don't they? Bringing their overall salary from £84,144 to £86,584. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, which sets the pay rate, said the 2.9% increase for MPs was the same as the average increase in pay for public sector employees last year. But with so many struggling through the cost of living crisis, can the move really be justified? And, well, realistically, this debate, again, kind of writes itself, doesn't it? With me now is Nick Chaffey, who I'm very grateful to say has joined us at quite short notice, actually. Thank you very much, Nick. Southern Regional Organiser for the Socialist Party. Nick, I mean, I think I can guess what you're about to tell me, but should MPs get a pay rise of 2.9%?
Well, you know, when MPs are demanding that workers are taking a pay cut at the present time, MPs on salaries currently are living in a different world to the average worker at the present stage. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by this, but I think people will be very, very angry.
MPs are workers, just like anybody else, and they have a job for a much shorter time, usually. A much shorter period of time than people who go into something that's a proper career, you get what I mean. A teacher for 40 years, or a nurse or a doctor for 40 years, for example, or working on the railways, etc. So shouldn't they be well paid for their time in office, making massive decisions for the nation?
Well, I think ultimately many of the people in the front line would argue that, you know, they're not doing the kind of jobs that keep people alive, that run the country on a day-to-day basis. And if they're public servants, why don't they match their commitment to society and the economy and live on the same wages as the average worker in Britain? When Dave Nellist, a member of the Socialist Party, was an MP in Parliament before he was expelled from the Labour Party, he stood as a workers' MP on a workers' wage. And I think that's the tradition that would be well supported by workers in Parliament. If we had genuine representation of ordinary workers, of health workers, of ambulance workers, of factory workers in Parliament, they'd be doing a lot more to sort the economic crisis.
Can I just ask, Nick? Yeah, but Nick, they have the same rights as anybody else to stand for election. I mean, you could argue, therefore, that the fact that we don't have more nurses or factory workers or people in Parliament is their own fault because they're not getting elected and they're not bothering to stand for it, whereas MPs are. So doesn't that defeat your argument?
Well, I think, sadly, for many people, Labour is no longer a party of the working class nor the trade union movement. The fact that Keir Starmer refuses to stand on a picket line with striking workers at the moment doesn't give workers great confidence that Labour is fighting in their interests. And I think, many of the arguments that we would make at the present time is if workers are going to have their voice heard in Parliament, then the trade union should stand candidates who will voice the needs of working class people.
I get that. Let's just bring it back. Let's just bring it back a little bit to the actual pace. If I get there's the bigger picture element to it, and I completely understand what you're saying there. But just in terms of this announcement today, the breaking news today, 2.9% is that pay increase. That's going to be, I think, laughably actually from April the 1st. But they would say, MPs would say, well, look, this is just due to the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. We have got no say over this, and it's a very similar body to the one that is recommending the kind of pay rises that nurses have been offered. So, realistically, they're just abiding by the same rules as the nurses, aren't they? Shouldn't the nurses accept what's been offered by this independent body?
Well, no, that's the point, isn't it? Nurses have made it clear, and other public sector workers have made it clear, these independent pay review bodies are not independent. They're guided by the government. They're given a tight parameter of what they're prepared to offer. If MPs want to give a lead and show that they're committed to levelling up, then, as I said, they should be standing as representatives of ordinary people, as public servants, and match their commitment with the average wage that most people are on. Let's remember what that is. That's just above 30 grand. That's the median average wage. If you're a low-paid worker,
I get that, but Nick, the uncomfortable truth with this, mate, right, is this, which is that for a lot of people, who are on the lower wage, and this sounds like a horrible thing to say, but it's not, they are not the calibre of individual and with the requisite intellect, say, not all of them, hear me out on this, some of them are not simply the kind of person who would be fit to be an MP. So saying that an MP should exist on that average wage, that would just be like it's asking someone who's doing a much more skilled job to deliberately not be remunerated in the way that they should be for that job. I mean, I suppose that is just radical socialism, which is possibly what you want, isn't it?
Well, no, not at all. I have much greater confidence in a nurse run in this country than the shambles that we currently got from the government that is destroying the health service. I think teachers in the front line providing a future for our children have got a much greater understanding of those needs of those children than the current front bench of the government that's cutting funding to our schools and to our education. So, no, I wouldn't agree at all. I think the working class in government would provide an immediate solution to these problems rather than continued promises, massive excuses. And let's be blunt about this. The economy is moving into an economic recession. How can we argue that the MPs that we currently have in Parliament are capable of running our economy?
OK, all right. Well, look, the figure is going to be around 86,584 quid for an MP. This is very final in just seconds. What would you pay an MP?
The average wage.
You would pay an MP for 30 grand and then, OK, I mean, the argument, we're going around the house here, but the argument is you just get very average MPs. You would, but there we go. Nick, thank you very much. Yeah, but even more average. Nick Chaffee, thank you very much. Southern Regional Organiser for the Socialist Party. I must say, I do enjoy those kind of chats, but there we go. That is the breaking news. MPs are going to get 2.9% pay rise. Lots of mixed views on this. As you can imagine, quite a few people saying that they shouldn't get any pay rise whatsoever. And I can understand that in the economic climate. Anyway, Rishi Sunak has now distanced himself from the views of the Deputy Tory Party chairman today after he backed the return of the death penalty. Red Wall MP Lee Anderson praised the policy on the grounds that it has a 100% success rate in preventing reoffending. Yes, because they'd be dead. He seems to have the support of large swathes of the public. The Prime Minister's clarified that neither he or his government support the policy, but they could be out of step with public opinion because a YouGov survey has found 52% of Brits think the death penalty should be reinstated in cases of multiple murder and 54% for people who are terrorists who would have gone on to kill. Joining me now is Ben Harris-Quinney. He's the chairman of the Bow Group Conservative think tank, and he doesn't agree with the death penalty. Ben, thank you very much. OK, so you disagree with Lee Anderson, do you? Why?
I do, and look, it's very unusual that I find myself essentially on the left of the Conservative Party, or indeed their chairman or deputy chairman. But no, I think the focus of justice has gone so far the wrong way to focus on rehabilitation rather than delivering justice for victims. And I think that's really what Lee Anderson is speaking to. There is a great sense in this country that justice isn't being done to criminals. But I think when it comes to the death penalty, I see that as a step too far, and I also see that as putting Britain in a different context as a nation. Whilst these horrific barbaric acts take place and should be condemned, I don't think you deal with them by lowering yourself to barbarity as well. And I also think prison should be a lot tougher. It should be a much harder experience, and maybe there's a lot of people that would rather be dead than spend the rest of their life in prison. So I would say yes to more whole-of-life orders, yes to prisons being a lot tougher, but no to the death sentence.
What about the cost to the taxpayer, Ben? We're hearing a lot about a cost of living crisis. I just had a rabid socialist on earlier on, and I mean, that's an argument, isn't it? That, you know, everyone's struggling between heating and eating. Maybe we could shave a few prisoners off our taxpayers' wage bill.
No, look, I don't think enough people go to prison, and I don't think they go to prison for long enough, but I think there could be huge savings made in terms of what we are providing to prisoners. As I say, I think, especially for the most severe crimes, prisons should be a horrible place to go. There shouldn't be televisions, there shouldn't be Sky, there shouldn't be all sorts of luxuries that are currently going in prison. There shouldn't be drugs, which are more prevalent in prisons than anywhere else in society. So I think things could be tightened up a lot, and costs could be cut. But I do think it's important that as a nation we invest in justice. Yes, there's a cost, but I think it's extremely important that the people of this country feel that justice is being done. And for those worst offenders, we've just heard several cases in your recent news bulletin. I think people want to see justice, and they're willing to live in a country that is willing to pay for that.
Yeah, look, I've been asking throughout the course of this show our viewers what they think on all of this, and loads of people getting in touch in terms of the fact that certain crimes that they would slap a death penalty on, basically paedophilia, rape, they've said, murder, for example, is a top one. Just in terms of the actual stats more generally over the course of the nation, supposedly 40% of Britons support the death penalty, 10% are unsure. So, yeah, pretty split, OK, when it comes to that. Conservative voters, Ben, you'll not be surprised to learn this, are more likely to support the death penalty. 58% apparently support the death penalty. If we're not going to have the death penalty, would you at all entertain the idea of some form of physical punishment in prisons instead?
No, I don't like the idea of any. I mean, it's just my personal view. Yeah. I don't like the idea of any sort of violence or barbarity in that way. I think it is important to make the case that in the United States, for example, where the death penalty does take place in certain states, the cost is far, far higher than that of the average prisoner, because there are so many legal cases attached, and you know it's not the case that it's a money-saving operation. So. I would be much, much tougher on prisons and justice than this Conservative Party has been, or actually really any previous Conservative government has been, but I wouldn't extend to death penalty. And look, I think the problem is that we had Dominic Grieve come and speak to the Bow Group when they were going into the 2010 general election. He was Shadow Justice Secretary, and he said, we're going to be tough on crime, but we're going to cut the prisons budget. And it was very obvious what was going to happen. They were going to be letting more and more criminals out of prison. That prison budget has gone down, and the crime rate has gone up since 2010. So I think it needs to be invested in. We need to get tougher on crime, but not as far as the death penalty.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much, Ben. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Ben Harris-Quinney there, who is the chairman of the Bow Group Conservative think tank. Just responding, actually, to what Lee Anderson was saying earlier on, which is that you certainly wouldn't be against the death penalty. It is a fascinating discussion. And, yeah, I do want to know from you, if you are in favour of it, what particular crimes? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Andrew's been on, for example. He says, if we're not prepared to reinstate the death penalty, then we must put them in prison for life. Otherwise, life doesn't mean life. Kind of echoing what Ben was saying there, really. And I do think that people think the death penalty argument raises its head when people do not feel as though we are tough enough on criminals, OK? So when they feel as though jihadists can commit crimes and then get back out on the streets, people want them killed. When they think that rapists or paedophiles, for example, can get a 4 or 5 year sentence and then be back out, they want them killed. So maybe if we were tougher on people, give them longer sentences and give them worse conditions in prison, then the death penalty argument would reduce. But we'll return to that in a little bit. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, unrelated story, has been in Brussels today, appealing for more support from EU countries. In a speech to the European Council, he told leaders that Europe's freedom depends on Ukraine and that his troops were defending EU in a historic battle with Russia. During yesterday's visit to the UK, his first since the Russian invasion, Zelensky renewed calls for air support and received positive signals from his Western allies. Rishi Sunak did say nothing is off the table when it comes to sending fighter jets, but that the first step will be to train the Ukrainian pilots. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace also spoke out, confirming there will be no immediate transfer of UK fighter jets to Ukraine. So, slightly mixed messages there. Russia, well, they've lashed out, haven't they? They've basically said that Zelensky was pompous for coming over here and then continuing to rattle the can all over Europe on some kind of big jetty tour. And Putin has threatened a strong response. If the UK does send jets, that strong response, by the way, is World War III. So it doesn't get too much stronger than that, does it? But joining me now is the former NATO commander and former Ministry of Defence Director General. It's Chris Parry. Thank you very much, Chris. People are concerned that if Zelensky gets what he wants and we send jets over there, then Putin will go nuclear. Your thoughts?
Well, he's not going to go nuclear. It's not worth his while in a regional conflict. You save your nuclear weapons for existential crises. This big bad wolf has been huffing and puffing for quite some time now, and people should ignore him when we ramp up the scale a bit. The other issue is we're not going to send Ukraine F-35s and Typhoon jets. They couldn't really get into the fight soon enough. What I suspect the government's going to do is shop around for some F-16s, MiG-29s, things like that, and upgrade them with avionics and missile systems. I think we need to listen very carefully to what Rishi Sunak said. They're investing in the Ukrainian Air Force in the long term, which suggests it's going to take a good while to get these aircraft into Ukraine.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, just given the fact that it is going to take quite a while, and given the fact that conflicts such as these can often be back and forth and tit for tat and stalemate and rumble on for years, does the British taxpayer just have to accept now that billions and billions of pounds every single year for the foreseeable future is going to be sent to Ukraine?
Yeah, I think we've all got to get used to the fact that the front line right now is our front door. Ukraine is fighting the battle that Russia would like to bring to us if it could. And frankly, they are dying in their numbers right now so that we don't have to. So frankly, a few billion supporting Ukraine is nothing compared to the sacrifice the rest of Europe's going to have to make if Russia gets its way over Ukraine and then starts projecting its power westward.
I've got slight concerns that Rishi Sunak might get caught up in a kind of personal psychodrama against Boris Johnson. He does not want to be outshone by Boris, who initially owned that Ukraine-Russia conflict and led the world, certainly led Europe, some would argue the world, in the defence there. And Rishi Sunak doesn't want to be outdone by him. Now, Zelensky started by saying, look, please give us some resources, please help us with taking refugees, please give us some fighting equipment. Then it became tanks. Then it became jets. At what point does it become troops? And we don't get a vote on it. Rishi Sunak says yes, so he doesn't want to look bad compared to Boris.
No, I think it's quite a clear distinction, Patrick, actually. The fact of life is, without Boris Johnson, Ukraine would be on its knees now. The UK was the first to come into the fight and help the Ukrainians, and they acknowledge that. But, you know, you don't have, if you start a war, you don't have to finish it. And Rishi Sunak, if he is careful, will carefully calibrate the support that is being given by the UK to Ukraine, and will end up in a situation where there is sufficient need. It will be provided by the British taxpayer and the British Armed Forces. Right now, the Ukrainians are facing the prospect of a major assault by the Russians at some stage in the next 3 weeks. They have to be able to resist that and survive. That's why tanks are being put in. That's why aircraft are being readied and people being trained to actually counter the Russian Air Force. Because make no mistake, the Russians will have learnt from their mistakes last year and will combine much more of their capability to overwhelm the Ukrainians.
Chris, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Chris Parry there, who is former Ministry of Defence Director General and former NATO commander as well, so knows his onions when it comes to that stuff. What do you make of that? Everybody, you're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News, and coming up, the latest on Nicola Bulley. The search for the missing mother has moved further downstream of the river near where she vanished. Search teams are now looking towards the sea. I've got loads coming your way and much, much more. Make sure that you stay tuned.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already depressed.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, so the search area where police are looking for missing Nicola Bulley has been widened and the Morecambe Bay coastline is now being scoured. It's been nearly 2 weeks since the mother of two disappeared and the police are exploring within new boundaries after the specialist diving team brought in by the family to help find her found no trace. Let's get an update now from GB News' North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper, who is in Knott End on Sea. Sophie, yes, the latest, please.
Well, as the sun sets here on day 14 in Lancashire of the search for Nicola Bulley, police still have no answers. They confirmed earlier that the search had now moved from the area where they believe Nicola was last seen to further down the River Wyre. Now, earlier today, police boats were seen here at the mouth of the river between Fleetwood and Knott End on Sea, as you say, where I'm stood this evening. This is where the river meets the Irish Sea. Now, yesterday, independent search team SGI pulled out of the search for the mother of two, with the founder, Peter Faulding, saying he believes they've done everything they can do and that she is categorically not in the part of the river where they have searched. Now, of course, the theory that Nicola went into the river has been disputed by her friends and family. They've said things like there's no evidence that she went in and that she was a strong swimmer. But despite that, Lancashire police still continue the search in the river. They've now moved further down in order to try and find some answers to the question, what has happened to Nicola Bulley?
Yes, indeed. Look, thank you very, very much, Sophie. Sophie Reaper there. That's our very own Northwest of England reporter. The mystery continues to deepen, doesn't it, unfortunately, when it comes to Nicola Bulley. Interesting that the police have had to issue dispersal orders for people who've been going to the scene, that infamous bench, really, where Nicola is supposed to have gone missing, to stop them taking pictures and stop searching properties themselves and stuff. It does really bring out the worst of us, doesn't it, when these things happen? But yes, unfortunately, still no sign of Nicola. Now, moving on, Burt Bacharach, one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century, has died aged 94. The composer and songwriter behind some all-time classics such as I Say a Little Prayer and Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head died yesterday at his Los Angeles home of natural causes. Record producer Pete Waterman joins me now. Pete, thank you very, very much. A sad loss for the music industry.
Well, one of the greats, you know, one of the last great songwriters of the 20th century is gone. I mean, he along with his partner, wrote some of the classic songs of all time, and they were inspirations for us all, really, including the Beatles, you know. Songs like Magic Moments, Say a Little Prayer, Close to You. I mean, unbelievable songs.
What made him so special? Do you think it was his ability to just tap into the public psyche and just know what a hit was?
Yeah, I mean, he was a great musician. Of course, he wasn't a lyricist. Hal David was a lyricist, but, I mean, the melodies, his arrangements and melodies were absolutely classic.
Yeah, indeed, and just so catchy, that kind of right mixture, I think, wasn't it, of actually really kind of moving, emotional music, but at the same time as well being catchy enough and relatively simplistic, if you'll forgive me for saying that, simplistic enough to get in the heads and be earworms of people, and they don't really make him too much like him anymore. When you look at the charts these days, they're all naff, aren't they?
Well, they're different, you know. I mean, there's not saying you couldn't have a Burt Bacharach now. Just you would need to write songs differently. I mean, these are two guys locked away to write a song. Now you've got 8 writers, and, you know, it's not the same. But, you know, have we lost Burt Bacharachs? I don't think so. I think somebody will pop up, but I can't see them on the horizon at the moment.
No, and that is unfortunate as well, isn't it? And, of course, you have been around the music industry for a very, very, very long time, if you don't mind me saying. And... what would when a Burt Bacharach song would emerge or something along those lines? Would you just know, right, we've got to try and get our hands on something like this? He just had the magic touch.
Yeah, I mean, his melodies sound easy, but everything sounds easy until you try it. And then, of course, there's this very fine line between genius and naff, and he never went naff.
No, indeed. Look, Pete, thank you very much. I appreciate you giving us your time and also coming to us, it says there, from Cheshire as well, which is my neck of the woods, so you never know. I might bump into you at a farmer's market at some point. That is the wonderful Pete Waterman there, just reacting to the sad passing, of course, of Burt Bacharach, passed away at the age of 94, the world-renowned songwriter and composer. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, new figures show that murders committed with a knife are up 20%. Shocking figures out when it emerges as well that the highest increase is among 16 to 18-year-olds. We'll get stuck right into that very, very shortly. But first, it is your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories: more than 19,000 people are known to have lost their lives after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of the UK International Search and Rescue Team have joined the effort to try to find survivors in the rubble. They tweeted to say they'd recently managed to rescue 2 women aged 60 and 90. And British charities are appealing for funds to help those affected by the disaster, with the UK government saying it'll match up to £5 million in public donations. Members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay increase from the 1st of April. That would bring their overall salary from around £84,000 a year to £86,000. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority says the pay increase for MPs was the same as the average increase in pay for public sector employees last year. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been addressing an EU summit in Brussels. He's been lobbying leaders to provide more weapons to Ukraine in the fight against Russia, which he's referred to as the biggest anti-European force of the modern world. Number 10 says it won't send fighter jets to the country if it puts the UK at risk. The applause that greeted the Church of England's General Synod today, as they're now to give blessings to same-sex couples in civil partnerships and marriages. They'll be able to attend services at Anglican churches, including receiving a blessing after a legal marriage ceremony. In a joint statement, the Archbishops of Canterbury and York said it had been a long road to get to this point, but the position on gay marriage hasn't changed. Same-sex couples still aren't to actually marry in church. Lancashire police say their search for the missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley, has moved now towards the coast. The force says they're now searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also issued a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's on Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public. The 45-year-old mother of two was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog along the river. And as you've been hearing, Burt Bacharach, one of pop music's greatest ever composers, has died at the age of 94. He wrote hits like I Say a Little Prayer and Walk On By, as well as movie themes including What's New Pussycat and The Look of Love. His publicist says he died surrounded by his family at his home in Los Angeles on Wednesday. Those are the latest news headlines. I'm back in about half an hour.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on that MP's pay rise. Yes, it hits us a little bit by surprise, that one. It broke while we were on air earlier on. MPs are going to get a 2.9% pay rise, taking their salary up to a cool £86,500 a year. Of course, they do get expenses as well. Now, very much, well, more than two sides to this, really, frankly, because people are saying, well, for the job that they do and the pressures that they have to go under and the fact that they... maybe only have a job for a few years in that sense as well. All of that stuff, the loss of a lot of privacy and social media and all of that, maybe that's not a huge amount of money. We want to entice the best and the brightest and the biggest minds that we possibly can. Those are the kind of people who can go and earn half a bar in the city with their eyes shut. And actually, if you decide that you're going to end up paying them all 30 grand instead, like we had a chap from the Socialist Party on earlier, then you just end up with a load of bang average thickos. Bev says, MPs are going to give themselves another pay rise. They claim to be democratic, but then ignore the electorate on illegal immigration, net zero, cost of living and everything else. Now, this is the angle that I would go off, Bev, actually, when it comes to not giving MPs a pay rise, is... are they actually doing a decent job at the minute? Well, I would argue not really, when you look at the fact that the country is in, not financial ruin. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but, well, it's not all rosy in the garden financially, is it? And when it does come to things that people really do care about, they're not doing particularly well on that either, are they? So, yes, I would say that maybe it's a little bit tone-deaf of the MPs to accept a pay rise in the current climate. James says, this just shows how out of touch our government is. They say there isn't enough money in the pot for a pay rise for many of the public sectors, including nurses who are on the front line saving lives, but they can give themselves more money. What a joke. Look, completely get that argument, by the way, completely get that. And I think the optics of this are terrible. Couple of points. They say it's an independent, well, it is an independent body that decides their pay rise. They could still reject it, to be fair. So there is that, James. And just when it comes to the pay rise to the public sector, they're not offering absolutely nothing. I completely understand that it's nowhere near what nurses want, nowhere near what a lot of members of our rail community want. They're not being offered nothing, and they are being offered, in many cases anyway, above 2.9%, although it's nowhere near around the 5% above inflation, something like that, that nurses want. So I take your point, James, and yes, I think the optics of this are pretty bad. And MPs are, of course, opening themselves up now for a load of criticism from people in the middle of a cost of living crisis when nurses and members of different unions are going on strike. They're just going to point at them now and go, you're already on loads of money and you're giving yourself even more money. Rick says, maybe if the unions took note of the MP's pay rise of around 2% and accepted the same, then there wouldn't be as many striking people. Well, there wouldn't be as many striking people because they've all pretty much already been offered around 2% increase, Rick, so they would accept that and they would get back to work, wouldn't they? It's a difficult topic because how do you equate what a nurse does with what an MP does? And I think there's a lot of grey area here because what the unions always do is they always go, well, what about that nurse on a chemo ward or saving people's lives or a paramedic? Yeah, and those people, incredibly valuable, and unfortunately, they do tend to be towards the lower end of the pay scale. But then you look at, well, train drivers, about 60-odd grand a year, are they still bracketed in? Unions say, oh, they're not giving the working people the pay rise that they deserve. Well, OK, but is a train driver who's on, roughly speaking, about 65 grand a year and an MP now is going to be on 86,000? I think that's possibly a fair differential, isn't it, between those two jobs? Maybe I'm wrong. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Moving on now, though. Shocking figures today show the number of people killed with a knife in England and Wales is at its highest level in 76 years. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show 4 in 10 murders were committed using a knife or sharp object in the year 2021 to March 2022. That's up by almost 20%. But more worryingly, the largest increase was in teenage boys, aged between 16 and 17, rising from 10 deaths to 24 deaths. Joining me now is Lorraine Jones, who is founder of the Dwayne Simpson Foundation. Look, thank you very, very much. And if you don't mind, would you mind just maybe telling our viewers and our listeners a little bit about why you are so passionate about this topic?
Thank you for having me, Patrick, this evening. Gosh, my passion has come out of great devastation. I lost my son, Dwayne Simpson, to knife crime in 2014. It's literally shredded my heart and changed my whole life and my family. Dwayne was killed by a sword. He saved a younger boy from being harmed. When I watched the CCTV, Patrick, I had to watch it 10 times because I couldn't believe that my son stood in the middle with his hands out, pleading with the guy, and the guy took out a sword. It was just one jab wound that went right through my son's heart. He died 2 days later at King's College Hospital in London. He was on the life support machine. He died saving this boy's life, and it was a sword.
Oh my gosh, I mean, it's just such a horrendous story. I'm just so sorry for you and all your family, and of course your son as well. What's your reaction then when you look at now the never-ending increase, more knife offences than in the last 76 years? Young people especially, 16 and 17-year-olds, mostly boys, let's be honest, mostly boys, getting involved. What's your reaction to that? What's your message to them?
It's absolutely heart-wrenching and horrifying. Dwayne was 20 when he was killed, and this was 2014. I've been campaigning relentlessly. There's countless other parents that have lost their children to knife crime. Dwayne started a boxing project called Dwayneamics, and I've been keeping that going. We have loads of lads coming through the doors. Instead of picking up knives, they pick up gloves, and they're boxing away in a positive, safe environment. When I look at the figures now, it just echoes the emergency, the state of emergency that we're in working more jointly with the police, with families, with the schools, with community leaders and community centres, not leaving out the churches and the faith groups. We're talking about young boys between the age of 16 and 18. They should be in education, further education, or working. What's happening to them? You don't just wake up one day and pick up a knife. There has to be some form of record of some failings, neglects, which have got them to this stage where they're carrying knives and killing with them. So there needs to be a lot more intervention.
Yeah, look, what do you think it is, Lorraine? Because a load of things get bandied about. People blame social media, and people also blame things in the home sometimes as well, of course. If there's people who've not had a particularly, I don't know, what would you say, normal home life or upbringing, sometimes a very destructive upbringing, that can maybe shake your moral compass. A loss of faith and people moving away from religion and towards more of a godless existence, some would say. The pull of gangs and fast, quick money. What is the cause of all of this stuff?
I can tell you what I've been told. And I've spoken to a number of young people, and I go into prisons as well. The root of it is poverty, wanting money, wanting it quick to keep up with the cost of living. Since we've gone into this cost of living crisis, the numbers have gone up of robberies. When they're going out to rob, they carry a weapon. The easiest weapon for them to get is a knife, not a gun. So we need to really look at the social and economic factors with families and young people. How are we helping them? Just last week, when I was on my way doing shopping for the project, because we have a soup and support project at our centre, a young boy stopped me and was begging. He was begging for £1, Patrick. I was startled because he had a school uniform on. I said to him, "What are you doing out of school?" He then had a meltdown. He said, "I'm trying to raise £5, miss, because if I don't bring this money today, I'm going to be beaten up." When he said beaten up, Patrick, all I saw was knife crime, because they're not using their fists now. They're taking out knives and knifing. And so I said to myself, how many young people are in debt? I know that the government's looking at families, how they can keep up with their electricity and gas.
Yeah.
But we need to speak to our kids. What have they got themselves into that they're in debt and they've gone into violence?
This is it. Look, Lorraine, thank you very, very much. I could talk to you all day and all evening about this, and I do hope to talk to you again soon. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. It must be an incredibly difficult thing to go through, and all love to you. That's Lorraine Jones there, founder of the Dwayne Simpson Foundation. Just talking about those shocking knife crime stats. And actually, people wheel out shocking stats all the time. These stats are actually genuinely very, very shocking. The highest level of knife crime and knife homicides in 76 years. Moving on now, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has declared nearly £4.8 million in earnings since resigning as Prime Minister last September. So Bojo has supposedly coined in nearly 5 million big ones since leaving the office of Prime Minister. It's amazing that anyone thinks he wants to go back, isn't it? And some people would say as well, why on earth would he want to go back when he can earn that amount of money? There's also been news in the last hour that members of Parliament will get a 2.9% pay increase from April the 1st, bringing the overall salary from £84,000 to £86,500. We've been talking a lot about that. With me now is Edwina Currie, former Conservative Prime Minister. Edwina, first and foremost, Boris Johnson's doing quite well for himself. Former Conservative Minister, sorry. I promoted you massively then. Sorry, Edwina. Or not sorry, actually. You could have got away with that. Anyway, Boris Johnson, £5 million, eh?
Well, yes, indeed. And 2.5 million of that he hasn't earned yet, because that's the fee for signing an exclusive contract with one of America's biggest speaking agencies. So he's on their website alongside Barack Obama and the Clintons and all sorts of important people. And, of course, he was born in New York, so he'll do very nice out of that. I suspect, Patrick, that some of this came about without any kind of planning. You know what? Let me just speculate. One of the mentions there is Bloomberg in Singapore. So Bloomberg's phoned his office and said, we'd like Boris to speak in Singapore. And Boris has said, I really don't want to go. Ask them for 200,000. No, make it 250,000. And Bloomberg have come back and said, no, that's fine. We'll see you there. And off he goes.
Exactly.
Some people...
Exactly, but just on this, Edwina, and I'm sorry, we are going to have to be quite short and sweet on this, apologies, but the idea now that people go, oh, Boris, he's just this incredibly self-interested man, he doesn't give a toss about the electorate and all this. Well, the fact that he's still an MP and keeps, apparently anyway, he's desperate to get back into Downing Street, I mean, he'd be taking a, what, £4.5 million a year pay cut if he decided to come back. I mean, no one sniffs at that. He must actually care.
He is not desperate to get back into Downing Street. He can't afford it. I've kept saying that. He could have contested again against Rishi Sunak. I think he had enough letters and he decided not to, because that was the calculation exactly, Patrick, that he did, that he can put notes on it 10 times as much, far more than that, when he's an ex-Prime Minister and a bit of a hero and a champion for freedom is what it says on that website. Oh, my goodness.
Well, exactly, and, you know, if he's decided to let Carrie redecorate one of their houses, then goodness gracious me, he's going to have to earn a lot more than £5.5 million, isn't he? Edwina, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I'll chat to you again soon. Edwina Currie there, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Right, Lee Anderson has caused waves today as he backed the return of the death penalty, certainly was sympathetic towards it. Anyway, Red Wall MP Lee Anderson praised the policy on the grounds that it has a 100% success rate in preventing reoffending. Rishi Sunak, of course, has distanced himself to it, but the polls, ladies and gents, are split on it. Joining me now is Henry Bolton, international security and border control expert. Henry, thank you very much.
Patrick?
Would you hang them and flog them?
It depends who they are and what they've done. Generally, no. Look, you know, we have this discussion every few years, every decade or so. Something happens, something triggers something, and we have this discussion, quite rightly so. And well done for Lee for bringing this up. It's great to have somebody in the House of Commons who speaks frankly, speaks his mind in a reasonable way. People can agree or disagree. So good that we're having this conversation. I think there is a question behind this. And earlier on, you know, whilst I was in the green room, you were talking about knife crime.
Yes.
But it's not just knife crime. I think, you know, what sympathy there is out there for that position that we reintroduce the death penalty is partly because our justice system simply isn't meting out the punishment that people think that these offenders deserve.
People feel as though they're not getting justice. Just for clarity, what crimes would you bring back the death penalty for?
Well, I think, you know, there's also the issue that in the past there have been miscarriages of justice, partly on the technology that's been, a forensic technology that's been available, you know, more recently has proven that. Now, the thing is that if you look at something like Lee Rigby's murder, which is all videoed, there is no dispute whatsoever as to what happened, how it happened, and who did it. You know, there is a case, I think, you know, a legitimate case to say, look, these people really, you know, what, we put them up at taxpayers' expense. There is no question whatsoever. We're not basing this on forensics. We're not basing it on any such thing as that. And there is a conversation perhaps to be had around that, and I have some sympathy with that. I also have some sympathy with those people who argue that perhaps, like David Carrick, who's just been sentenced for 32 years for 24 rapes.
Yeah.
Now, he was a police officer. He was in a position of trust. Now, we need to make sure that people like that are punished far more than he's just got, what, 1.5 years for each rape. I'm sorry, but as a police officer, I'm a former police officer, we should have thrown a book at him, and he should never, ever come out of jail.
Are we just giving them what they want, though? A lot of people who do go on and commit heinous crimes kill themselves, so they want a way out, don't they?
You know, fine, but they will go through. Put them in solitary confinement, and they will suffer. Part of the other problem is that for such people, our prisons are questionably difficult for them. They should be more harsh, this regime that they go through. They should suffer for their crime. And the problem is that the public don't perceive that they are suffering, and worse than that, potential offenders think they get off lightly.
Look, Henry, thank you very, very much. We've squeezed a bit there, but that's Henry Bolton there, who is international security and border expert. Right, up next is Jubes & Co. It's Michelle Dewberry, who is here in the studio. Michelle, great to see you. What's going on?
Hello, Patrick. Listen, I just caught the very tail end of one of your interviews there with that lady that was talking about knife crime. I couldn't believe my ears when she was saying that one of the reasons for an increase in knife crime amongst teenagers is the cost of living.
Yeah.
What outgoings does a 16-year-old have? What am I missing?
No, I know, but to be honest with you, Michelle, it's quite difficult, isn't it, sometimes to pick up, because bless her, you know, she's lost her son and stuff, and you don't want to kind of seem like you're picking people up on stuff. But I get exactly what you mean. I was thinking the same thing, and, you know, actually, a lot of the time as well, people do look at it and go, well, what kind of home life? How on earth can it be that kids are able to go out on the street, get a knife, and where do the parents think they are at 11 o'clock at night? You hear all these kids who are 13 and 14 years old getting stabbed, and they're out at 1 o'clock in the morning. What's going on?
I know, and I tell you, as a mum to a boy, granted a little one, it's worrying, because you just want your kids to be able to go out and about and be safe. So, of course, sympathies to the lady for the loss of her son. But we do have to be realistic about what's causing some of this, if indeed we are to tackle it. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about on my show, but I couldn't help but comment, because I was just listening to it out the back there. Lots coming up in my show. I found that last conversation about the death penalty fascinating. I want to pick that up as well. And how many kids should you be allowed to claim child benefit for? Should it cut off at 2 or just ongoing? As many as you want. You
could have a football team, couldn't you? Yes, there you go. You can pay for a football team. Michelle, thank you very much. And Jubes & Co. will be up next for another rip-roaring show. Look, thank you, everybody who's been tuning in. I'll be back again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Right now, though, it's your weather.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. Bright blue skies for many of us this afternoon, having cleared the earlier cloud and drizzle in the south. But in the far north, here we've got strong winds and some heavy showers. Those showers ease in the north of Scotland through the rest of the day. The next weather front is approaching. That's actually going to bring milder, albeit cloudier weather as we head into the weekend. But for the time being, cloud clearing the south, bright blue skies for a time across England and Wales, and then clear spells overnight. That will allow temperatures to fall away in the south. Meanwhile, for northern England, North Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, a lot more cloud here. Some outbreaks of rain, mainly focused across western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, and a keen breeze keeping temperatures up in the mid-single figures. So frost-free in the north, but in the south, widely below zero and as low as -7 Celsius in some sheltered spots as we start Friday. So another cold start across southern parts of the UK. But a bright start, and we keep the sunny spells in the southeast during the afternoon, but elsewhere a lot of cloud arrives. That cloud thick enough to give a few spots of rain over Exmoor, the Welsh Mountains, northwest England, but the most persistent rain will be across western Scotland. Some cloud breaking up for northeast Scotland. That's where the warmest weather will be on Friday afternoon, 12 Celsius, and it's going to be a mild day for all of us with a lot of cloud and a breeze coming in from the southwest. That's going to be gusting over the hills of northern England and Scotland during Friday afternoon and evening. Could be tricky travelling conditions as we start off half term in many places. But for actually overnight temperatures, as we begin the weekend, it's not going to be particularly cold. A touch of frost is possible where we get some cloud breaks overnight in the south, but for most, it's a milder start to Saturday compared with recent mornings, And it's a milder day compared with recent mornings, albeit with a lot of cloud cover and some outbreaks of rain in Scotland. Sunday looks very similar as well.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Juby. This is Jubes & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking. And I'll tell you what's got a lot of people talking today. Lee Anderson's latest thoughts. He was saying, basically, why not bring back the death penalty? You know, you don't really have reoffending, do you, if someone's dead? But what do you make to that? Should we even just have a referendum on it and have done with it? Give me your thoughts. And according to the Labour Party, it will take 22 years for women to catch up with men when it comes to applying for STEM subjects. And what? Why should we care? Why is there this fascination that if you've got one man applying to go on a science, technology or whatever course, you have to equally have one woman? Why? Is it important? Am I missing something? You tell me. And should there be a limit on the amount of children that you can receive child benefits for? I'm not talking about historically, I'm talking about families going forward. 2 is the cut-off. Is that harsh or fair? And net zero. I can't help but notice we have been asked to make a lot of changes to our lives, whether it's increased taxes, looking at changing our cars, looking at our heating system, our insulation. Now, wood burners, they are for the chop in some instances. Meat. I mean, come on now. Is this all getting a little bit much? All these tiny, overbearing impacts, changes on our life when, let's face it, China, India, all those polluters, they're not doing anything that they really need to be doing. Is it time to say, come on, enough now? We'll get into all of that, but before we do so, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines with the legend that is Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. More than 19,000 people are now known to have died after Monday's earthquakes in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Around 70 members of the UK International Search and Rescue Team have joined the effort to try to find survivors in the rubble. They tweeted to say they'd recently managed to rescue 2 women aged 60 and 90. Hundreds of thousands of people have been left homeless in freezing conditions, with the World Health Organization now warning many more could die without shelter. British charities are appealing for funds to help those affected by the disaster, with the government saying it'll match up to £5 million in public donations. Well, also breaking news within the last hour or so, members of Parliament are to get a 2.9% pay increase. That's from the 1st of April. That's going to bring their overall salary from around £84,000 a year to £86,000. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority says the pay increase for MPs was the same as the average increase in pay for public sector employees last year. Lancashire Police say their search for the missing mother of 2, Nicola Bulley, has now moved towards the sea. The force says it's searching further downstream where the River Wyre becomes tidal. Officers have also had to issue a 48-hour dispersal order for St Michael's on Wyre after an abandoned house was reportedly searched by members of the public trying to solve the case for themselves and then posting footage on social media. The 45-year-old was last seen 13 days ago walking her dog. A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been charged with rape. PC Jordan Pascal was charged by Essex Police in connection with an allegation of non-recent rape. The charge relates to an alleged incident from 2009. He joined the force in 2012. He's since been suspended from duty and will appear in court in March. A former Labour MP has been jailed for 4 years after being found guilty of fraud committed while he was in office. Jared O'Mara has been convicted of 6 counts of fraud after trying to claim around £52,000 worth of taxpayers' money to fund his cocaine habit. The 41-year-old, who was an MP between 2017 and 2019,